The Church teaches that God created man in his image and that before Adam there was only darkness and the void. They teach us that we are the first masters of this world. But in the winter of 1520, a single strike of a hammer in the depths of the Vatican shattered that lie forever. It was not a theological debate or a whisper of heresy. It was a physical discovery. Workmen expanding the foundations of the Belvedere courtyard broke through a wall that was never marked on any map. It was a wall that should not have been there. Behind the stone they did not find a saint. They did not find a treasury of gold. They found a sealed chamber that dated back 10,000 years before the Garden of Eden. And inside that chamber, sitting upon a throne of black basalt, was a skeleton that looked human but was terrifyingly different. The proportions were wrong. The skull was elongated. And the bones were not made of calcium but of something that shimmered like glass. The Pope ordered the chamber sealed within the hour. He ordered the workmen silenced. But one cardinal saw it. He saw the crown resting on that ancient head, and he realized the terrifying truth. We are not the first. We are merely the squatters living in the ruins of a greater, darker kingdom. This is the truth the king buried. Now let us turn back the pages of the years. Let the noise of the modern world fade away. Imagine the light growing dim. The electric hum of your life is replaced by the soft crackle of a beeswax candle. The air becomes cool and still. You are no longer where you were. You are drifting back through the corridors of time, down through the centuries, past the wars and the revolutions, back to a time of stone and shadow. Let your breathing slow down. Let your mind open to the secrets of the past. We are standing in Rome. It is the height of the Renaissance. The air smells of wet marble and incense. It is a time of beauty. But beneath the beauty lies a secret waiting to be found. The year is 1520. Rome is a city reborn. The great artists like Raphael and Michelangelo walk the streets. Their hands are covered in paint and marble dust as they create masterpieces that celebrate the glory of God and the power of the Church. The Vatican is the heart of this world. It is a fortress of faith, a palace of white stone rising above the Tiber River. To the common man looking up from the muddy streets, the Vatican seems eternal, solid, unchanging. It is the rock upon which the world is built, but buildings are like living things. They grow, they change. They have secrets hidden in their bones. Pope Leo X was a man of great ambition. He wished to expand the grandeur of the papal palaces. He wanted to connect the Vatican Palace to the Villa Belvedere with a long, majestic courtyard. It was to be a place of art and leisure, a place where the Vicar of Christ could walk in peace. To build such a wonder, the earth had to be moved. Foundations had to be dug deep into the ancient soil of Rome. Rome is not built on solid ground. It is built on layers of history. Like a book where the pages have been glued together by time. When you dig in Rome, you do not just dig into dirt. You dig into the past. It was a Tuesday in November. The weather was unusually cold for Italy. A biting wind blew down from the Alps, chilling the sweat on the backs of the laborers. They were deep underground in the lower substructures of the construction site. These men were accustomed to the dark. They were accustomed to the smell of wet earth and ancient rot. They were diggers, men of the pickaxe and the spade. Their task was simple. They were to clear a space for a new support column. The architect had drawn the plans. The engineers had calculated the weight. Everything was precise. Everything was known. Or so they thought. The foreman was a man named Giuseppe. He was a man of few words who knew the soil of Rome better than he knew his own children. He knew the difference between the soft clay of the riverbank and the hard, packed earth of the imperial era. Giuseppe was swinging his pickaxe against a wall of rough stone. It looked like natural bedrock. It was covered in centuries of grime and mineral deposits. It should have been the end of the line. The limit of the excavation. Clang. The sound was wrong. Giuseppe stopped. He held up his lantern. The flame flickered in the stagnant air, casting long dancing shadows against the rough walls. He struck the stone again. Clang. It was not the dull thud of solid rock. It was a ringing sound. A vibration that traveled up the handle of the pickaxe and into his arms. It sounded hollow. Giuseppe called for silence. The other workmen stopped their digging. The rhythmic scraping of metal on stone ceased. The silence of the underground descended upon them. It was a heavy, oppressive silence. The kind of silence that feels like it is watching you. Giuseppe tapped the wall with the handle of his hammer. Thud, 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 thud. There was a space behind it. A large space. This was impossible. The maps of the Vatican archives showed nothing in this sector. No crypts, no ancient cisterns, no wine cellars. According to the records of the Holy See, this area was solid earth, all the way down to the bedrock, but the sound did not lie. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially in the Vatican. But Giuseppe was a builder, and a builder must know what lies beneath his foundation. He ordered the men to bring the heavy SLEDGES. They began to attack the false bedrock. The outer layer crumbled away easily. It was a camouflage, a clever disguise made of mortar and mud designed to look like natural stone. Beneath the disguise they found masonry, but it was not Roman masonry. Roman bricks are red and flat. They are laid with precision. This stone was black. It was cut into strange interlocking shapes. Polygon blocks that fit together so perfectly that not even a knife blade could slide between them. It looked more like the walls found in the jungles of the Americas or the ancient fortresses of Peru than anything in Italy. The men hesitated. They crossed themselves. The air around the black wall felt colder than the rest of the tunnel. It radiated a chill that seemed to seep into their bones. Break it down, Giuseppe ordered. The sledgehammer swung. Sparks flew as steel struck the black stone. It was incredibly hard, harder than granite. It took them hours to make even a small crack. Finally, with a sound like a cracking bone, a section of the wall gave way. A black hole appeared, roughly the size of a man's head, and then came the wind. It did not rush in. It rushed out. A blast of stale, pressurized air hissed out of the hole. It blew out the lanterns. The men were plunged into total darkness. In the blackness, they heard the sound of the wind dying down. It sounded like a long exhaled breath, like the earth itself was sighing after holding its breath for 1,000 years. Light the lamps, Giuseppe whispered. His voice trembled. When the flames sputtered back to life, the men saw that the hole opened into a vast darkness. The beam of the lantern could not find the back wall. They had found a room that had been hermetically sealed. The air that had rushed out was the same air that had been trapped inside when the wall was built. That air was thousands of years old. It tasted metallic, dry. It tasted of dust and old spices. Word was sent up the line. The work stopped. A messenger ran through the muddy tunnels, up the wooden scaffolding, and into the pristine hallways of the Vatican Palace. The message eventually reached Cardinal Bernardo Bibbiena. He was a close advisor to the Pope, a man of intellect and art. He was writing a letter when the messenger arrived. He listened to the description of the black wall, the interlocking stones, the hollow sound. The cardinal did not smile. He did not dismiss it as a peasant's superstition. He went pale. He knew of the rumors. Every high-ranking official in the church knew the rumors. There were whispers in the libraries, whispers about what lay beneath the 7 hills of Rome, whispers that the church had built its house on top of, something else to keep it suppressed. "Show me the cardinal," said. He gathered his robes and followed the foreman down into the earth, down past the marble, past the brick, into the mud and the dark. When Cardinal Bibbiena stood before the breach in the wall, he felt a profound sense of wrongness. The geometry of the stones disturbed him. It was too perfect, too mathematical. It felt alien to the human eye. He took a torch from one of the workmen. He was a brave man, or perhaps he was just arrogant. He believed the light of Christ protected him. Widen the hole, he commanded. The men worked with renewed fear. They sensed the cardinal's unease. When the opening was large enough for a man to step through, the cardinal held up his hand. "Wait here," he told them. "I will enter alone." He stepped through the jagged opening and into the silent chamber. The floor was smooth, polished like a mirror. His footsteps echoed sharply in the vast space. He raised the torch high. The room was circular, a perfect rotunda. The walls were lined with niches, but there were no statues of saints. There were no crosses. There were no inscriptions in Latin or Greek or Hebrew. Instead, the walls were covered in carvings of star charts. But they were not the stars the cardinal knew. The constellations were different. They were shifted, as if they had been carved when the earth sat at a different angle in the heavens. In the center of the room sat a throne. It was carved from a single block of basalt, heavy, brutal, and sitting upon the throne was the figure that would haunt the cardinal's dreams until the day he died. It was a skeleton. It sat upright, regally. Its hands rested on the armrests of the throne. It was dressed in the remnants of a robe made of a material that had not rotted away. It looked like woven gold mesh, fine and intricate. The cardinal stepped closer. The silence was deafening. He could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. He brought the torch near the face of the king. And he gasped. The skull was human, yet not human. It was elongated at the back, stretching upwards and backwards in a way that no human skull naturally forms. The eye sockets were large. Too large, but it was the texture of the bone that stopped the cardinal's heart. Bone is porous. It is white and chalky. It is dead matter. The skeleton was translucent. Under the light of the torch, it shimmered with a pearlescent glow. It looked like opal or clouded glass. It caught the light and seemed to hold it, holding a faint inner luminescence. This was not a deformity. This was not a disease. This was a different biology. Resting on the brow of the glass skull was a crown. It was not gold. It was made of a strange dark metal that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. It was shaped like 2 intertwined serpents, their heads meeting in the center of the forehead. The cardinal realized with a jolt of terror that he was looking at a creature that had ruled this land before the flood, before the rise of Rome, before the tribes of men had learned to stack stone upon stone. The church taught that Adam was the first man. That civilization began in Eden, but the thing on the throne was a king of a civilization that possessed high art, mathematics, astronomy, and it had existed here deep beneath the soil of Rome long before the first. word of the Bible was written. This was a pre-Adamite king. The implications were catastrophic. If this discovery was made public, it would shatter the timeline of the Bible. It would suggest that man was not a unique creation, but perhaps a successor or a survivor. The cardinal noticed something else. At the feet of the throne there were jars, sealed amphorae, but they were not for wine. They were etched with symbols that looked like warnings, and on the lap of the skeleton resting in its glass fingers was a tablet. A stone tablet covered in geometric lines. It looked like a schematic, a blueprint. The cardinal reached out. His hand trembled. He wanted to touch the tablet. He wanted to know what the glass king was guarding. As his finger grazed the edge of the tablet, a sound filled the room. It was a low hum, a vibration. It seemed to come from the throat of the skeleton itself, or perhaps from the throne. It was a resonant frequency that made the cardinal's teeth ache. He pulled his hand back. The hum stopped. He backed away, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He understood now why the wall had been built, why it had been disguised. Someone knew this was here. The ancients who built Rome knew. The early church fathers perhaps knew. They had not built the Vatican here by accident. They had built it as a capstone, a seal to keep this down, to keep the pre-Adamite history buried in the dark. Cardinal Bibbiena scrambled back through the hole in the wall. He emerged into the tunnel, sweating and pale. His eyes were wide with a terror that no prayer could soothe. Seal it, he rasped. The workmen looked at him. Seal it now, he screamed, his voice cracking. Build the wall back, thicker, stronger, pour mortar into the cracks. Forget you ever saw this place. Forget the sound. Forget the hole. He looked at Giuseppe the foreman. If you speak of this, the cardinal whispered, leaning close, his eyes burning with intensity, you will be excommunicated. You will be erased. Your name will be struck from the book of life. This place does not exist. The workmen hurried to obey. They piled stones back into the breach. They mixed new mortar with shaking hands. Within hours, the black wall was hidden once again behind a layer of rough stone. Cardinal Bibbiena went straight to the Pope. The records of their meeting were burned, but the construction plans were altered. The foundation was moved 3 yards to the east, a deliberate imperfection in the design to avoid disturbing the sleeper again, but the cardinal could not forget. He had seen the glass bones. He had seen the star charts of a different sky. He wrote a diary, a secret journal that he kept hidden in the lining of his vestments. In it he wrote of the pre-Adamite king. He wrote of the feeling he had in that room, the feeling that the king was not dead, merely waiting. He wrote of the serpents on the crown. And he asked a question that would plague him until his death a year later. If they were here before us, and if they were so advanced, why did they die? What killed the kings of glass? And is it still here waiting for us to make a mistake? The wall remains there to this day. Somewhere beneath the Belvedere courtyard, deep in the exclusion zone of the Vatican archives, the hollow space still exists. The air inside is still stale. The throne still sits in the dark, but the cardinal's discovery was only the beginning, because the Vatican did not just hide the room. They began to hunt for others. They created a secret department, a group of men within the church whose only job was to find the evidence of the pre-Adamites and erase it. They call it the Department of Silence. And 50 years later they would find something even more terrifying than a skeleton. They would find the reason why the glass bones were hidden. They would find the map. You see, the cardinal thought the skeleton was the secret. He thought the existence of a pre-Adamite king was the danger, but he was wrong. The skeleton was just the guardian. The real danger was what the king was protecting. The cardinal had seen the tablet on the skeleton's lap, but he hadn't deciphered it. Years later, a Jesuit scholar would break the code of the geometric lines. He would realize that the tablet wasn't a prayer and it wasn't a history. It was a map to the other cities buried beneath the earth. And one of those cities wasn't dead. The church was about to learn that some things do not stay buried forever, and that the bones of glass were merely the cage for something else. Something that was beginning to wake up. History tells us that flesh rots and bone turns to dust. It tells us that the human body is a fragile vessel made of calcium and carbon destined to return to the earth. But the entity sitting on the throne beneath the Vatican defied the laws of biology. When they touched the arm of the king, they did not feel the rough, chalky texture of ancient bone. They felt the cold, smooth surface of polished crystal. This was not a fossil. This was a biological impossibility. The skeleton was composed of a silicate lattice structure, a living glass that was stronger than steel and lighter than a feather. It possessed no marrow. It possessed no decay. It was a conductor, a vessel designed not just to hold a soul, but to channel energy. The church realized in that terrifying moment that the rulers of the ancient world were not merely powerful men. They were genetically distinct. They were the shining ones mentioned in the forbidden texts. And they had not evolved from the mud of this earth. They had been constructed. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the shock of the discovery fade into the shadows. Let us step back into the silence of the vault. The torchlight flickers against the damp walls. The air is heavy with the weight of centuries. You are safe here. You are merely an observer floating through time. Watch as the dust motes dance in the stagnant air. Listen to the beating of your own heart as we lean closer to inspect the impossible. The world above is noisy and bright, but down here there is only the mystery. Let us look at the king. Let us look at the bones that should not exist. Cardinal Bibbiena could not leave the discovery alone. Though he had ordered the wall sealed, his mind remained trapped in that circular room. He needed to understand. He needed to know if his eyes had deceived him in the flickering torchlight. Was it truly glass, or was it some trick of the ancient embalmers? A lacquer applied to the bone to preserve it. He needed a man of science. But he could not trust the Vatican's official physicians. They were men of dogma. They would see a demon where there was only biology. They would call for an exorcism when what was needed was an autopsy. So under the cover of a moonless night, the cardinal summoned a man named Dr. Alidoro. Alidoro was a controversial figure in Rome. He was a surgeon who had studied in the East. He had seen the anatomy charts of the Persians and the Arabs. He was a man who believed that the truth of God was written in the tissues of the body, not just in the verses of Scripture. Alidoro was brought to the Vatican in a carriage with the curtains drawn. He was led through the labyrinth of the lower levels blindfolded. He did not know where he was. He only knew that the air grew colder and the smell of the earth grew stronger. When the blindfold was removed, he found himself standing before the breach in the wall. The stones had been temporarily removed by the cardinal's loyal guards. The doctor entered the chamber. He was a man of steel nerves. He had dissected plague victims. He had set bones on the battlefield. But when he saw the figure on the throne, he stopped. He did not pray. He did not scream. He simply stared. the light of the lanterns played across the skeleton, and the skeleton seemed to drink the light. Alidoro approached. He put on his spectacles. He reached into his leather bag and withdrew a small silver hammer and a magnifying lens. He knelt before the throne. He treated the king not as a monster but as a patient. He first examined the hands. The fingers were long and slender. The phalanges were tapered. But it was the material that captivated him. He ran his thumb over the surface of the metacarpals. It was impossibly smooth. There were no pores. There were no rough ridges where muscles would attach. It felt like touching a gemstone that had been warmed by the sun. He brought the magnifying lens to his eye. What he saw made him tremble. Human bone is a honeycomb. What he saw made him tremble. Human bone is a honeycomb. It is porous. It is designed to be light and to house the marrow which produces blood, but this bone was solid, or nearly solid. It was composed of millions of tiny transparent fibers tightly packed together. They ran in perfect parallel lines along the length of the bone. It looked like a fiber optic cable centuries before such a thing was even dreamed of. Alidoro tapped the bone gently with his silver hammer. Ting. It rang like a crystal goblet. A pure clear note that hung in the air for a long time. This was not calcium phosphate. This was a silicate. Silicon is the element of earth, of rock, of glass. Carbon is the element of life, of flesh, of wood. We are carbon-based life forms. All life on Earth is carbon-based, but the thing on the throne was silicon-based. Alidoro looked up at the cardinal. His face was pale in the lantern light. "Your Eminence," he whispered. This creature did not grow. It was cast, or grown in a way that we cannot comprehend. He moved to the rib cage. The ribs were not separate curved bones. They were fused. They formed a solid breastplate of this translucent material. It offered perfect protection for the organs that once beat beneath it. But where were the organs? Usually a skeleton is just the frame. The soft tissues rot away, but Alidoro noticed a residue inside the rib cage. A fine glittering dust. It looked like gold dust mixed with diamond powder. He scraped a small amount of the dust onto a glass slide. "This is not dust," he said. "This is the remains of the blood." He realized then that the biology of this entity was completely alien. If the bones were glass, then the blood must have been something else. Something metallic. Something capable of conducting the immense energy that a silicon body would require. The legends of the ancient world speak of the ichor, the golden blood of the gods, the blood that was toxic to mortals, the blood that glowed. Alidoro was looking at the dried remains of Ichor. He moved up to the neck. The vertebrae were interlocked with a complexity that baffled him. A human neck can turn only so far, but the joints of this creature suggested it could turn its head almost completely around like an owl. It was a predator's neck, and then he reached the skull of the glass. King. It was the crown jewel of this impossible anatomy. Alidoro placed his hands on either side of the cranium. It was cool to the touch. The elongation of the skull was not the result of binding. Some ancient cultures bound the heads of their infants to mimic the gods. They deformed the bone to look like the elites, but this was natural. The skull plates were not fused in the same way as a human. There was no fontanelle. It was a single seamless piece of biological glass. The capacity of the brain case was enormous. It was perhaps 40% larger than a human brain. Alidoro peered into the eye sockets. They were wide and slanted. But deep inside the skull there were small holes. Not for optic nerves, But for something else, he shined his light directly into the ear canal. Human ears contain tiny bones. The hammer, the anvil, the stirrup. They vibrate to translate sound into nerve impulses. Alidoro saw no bones inside the ear. Instead, he saw a spiral, a perfect crystalline spiral carved directly into the skull itself. It was a cochlea made of stone. He realized with a jolt that this creature would not hear sound the way we do. It would hear frequencies. It would hear the vibration of the earth. It would hear the hum of the stars. It was built to listen to the universe. The cardinal watched the doctor work. He saw the mixture of awe and terror on the man's face. "What is it?" the cardinal asked. "Is it a demon?" Alidoro sat back on his heels. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. "No, Your Eminence," he said softly. "A demon is a spirit. This is a machine. A biological machine." He pointed to the spine. "Look here," running down the center of the spine. Embedded in the glass was a thin line of darker material. It looked like a vein of gold and quartz. "This is the nervous system," Alidoro explained. "But it is not made of nerves. It is made of metal, or a metalloid. This creature was wired. It was designed to channel a power that would burn a human man to ash." The cardinal stepped closer. He looked at the silent, shimmering king. "So he was not born of a woman?" the cardinal asked. Alidoro shook his head. "I do not think so. I think he was made. Or perhaps he came from a place where life takes a different path. A path of crystal and light instead of water and mud." The implication hung in the air, heavier than the stone above them. If they were made, then who was the maker? And if they were made of glass and gold, why did they die? Alidoro reached for the crown, the serpent crown that rested on the glass brow. "Do not touch it," the cardinal warned. Alidoro hesitated. His hand hovered inches from the black metal. He felt it then. The heat. The skeleton was cold. The room was cold. But the crown was hot. It was radiating a faint, dry heat, like a stone that had been left in the desert sun. But there was no sun here. "The crown is active," Alidoro whispered. "It is drawing power from somewhere." He looked closely at the contact point where the metal of the crown touched the glass of the skull. He saw a spark. It was microscopic. A tiny blue flash that jumped from the metal to the bone. It was a connection. A circuit. "The king is not dead," Alidoro said, his voice rising in panic. "He is not dead, Your Eminence. He is powered down." The cardinal grabbed the doctor by the shoulder and pulled him back. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that this is a battery," Alidoro said, pointing at the skeleton. "The glass stores the energy. The crown collects it. He is waiting. He is waiting for the signal to wake up." The hum returned. The low vibration that the cardinal had heard on the first day. It started in the floor. Then it moved up into the throne. And then the skeleton began to sing. It was not a vocal song. It was the ringing of the crystal. The glass bones were resonating. Ting, hum, thrum. The sound grew louder. It was a harmonic frequency. It felt like it was vibrating the water in their own bodies. Alidoro covered his ears. The sound was painful. It was a sound that triggered a primal fear in the brainstem. The fear of the predator. The fear of the superior. "We must leave," the doctor yelled. They gathered their tools. They fled the chamber. The sound followed them down the tunnel. A mournful, high-pitched song of the waking dead when they were back in the safety of the upper levels. The cardinal made Alidoro swear an oath of silence, but Alidoro was a man of science. He could not forget. He went back to his study. He wrote down his findings. He drew sketches of the glass bones. He drew the spiral ear. He drew the fused ribs. He hid these papers in the binding of a medical textbook. He formulated a theory that was too dangerous to speak aloud. He believed that the Pre-Adamites were not just rulers. They were transmitters. They were living antennas placed on Earth to receive commands from the stars. And because their bones were made of glass, they were immortal. They did not age. They did not rot. They could only be broken, and that is why they were hidden, because you cannot kill what is made of crystal. You can only bury it, but the most disturbing discovery Alidoro made was not in the Vatican vault. It was in the streets of Rome. Weeks after the examination, Alidoro was walking through the market. He saw a child, a beggar boy. The boy was sick. He was coughing. But when the boy looked up, Alidoro saw his eyes. They were wide, slanted. And when the sunlight hit the boy's arm, Alidoro saw a shimmer under the skin. He grabbed the boy's arm. He felt the bone. It was hard. Too hard. It was smooth. The boy pulled away and ran into the crowd. Alidoro stood, frozen in the street. The bloodline had not been completely erased. The glass genes were still here, diluted, hidden, but present. There were walkers among U.S. who carried the fragments of the Pre-Adamite code. The church thought they had sealed the king in the vault. But biology is not so easily contained. Life finds a way. The skeleton in the vault was just the pure strain, the original, but the hybrids were out here, in the sun, unaware of what they were, unaware of why they felt different, unaware of why they could hear a hum that no one else could hear. Alidoro realized that the Vatican's mission was not just to hide the past. It was to police the future. They were watching for the return of the traits. They were watching for the children of glass. This knowledge drove Alidoro into madness. He began to see the shimmer in everyone. He began to hear the hum in every quiet room. He eventually disappeared. Some say the church silenced him. Some say he went looking for the boy, but the notes he left behind survived. They tell us that the human frame is a cage, and that inside some of us there is a different structure waiting to emerge. The skeleton on the throne sits there still. The battery is still charging. The glass is still singing, and somewhere in the world today a child is born with bones that are a little too smooth, with eyes that are a little too wide, and with a mind that can hear the stars. The cardinal knew this. That is why he panicked. That is why he wrote the letters, but Alidoro's examination was only physical. He saw the what. He did not see the why. The cardinal, however, began to understand the why when he received the first letter of panic from a monk in the archives. You see, while Alidoro was looking at the bones, the librarians were looking at the location. They overlaid the map of the Vatican with the ancient star charts found on the wall, and they realized that the throne room wasn't just a tomb. It was a coordinate, and it was pointing to something else buried even deeper, something that the cardinal would have to confront in his nightmares. The cardinal's first letter was about to reveal the true name of the king and the terrible bargain the church had made to keep him asleep. We are taught that the Vatican is the fortress of God and that the cardinals are the shepherds of the truth. But in the deep winter of 1520, Cardinal Bibbiena ceased to be a shepherd and became a jailer. He did not go to the chapel to pray after seeing the glass king. He went to his private study and locked the heavy oak door. His hands shook so violently that he spilled the ink across his desk. It was a stain that looked like black blood. He wrote a letter that night. A letter that was never meant to be read by the public. A letter that was not addressed to the Pope or to the King of France. It was addressed to the future. In it, he admitted the ultimate heresy. He wrote that the church was not built to save souls. It was built to weigh down the earth. He wrote that the scriptures were a veil placed over the eyes of man to keep him from seeing the monsters that ruled before us. He confessed that the Vatican is not a house of worship. It is a containment facility, and the thing in the basement was waking up. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the panic subside. Let the ink dry on the page. Let us step into the quiet of the cardinal's study. The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers. The shadows are long, and they seem to reach out from the corners of the room. You are safe here in the dark. You are merely a witness to the history that was erased. Listen to the scratch of the quill on the parchment. Smell the melting wax of the seal. Feel the cold draft coming from the window that overlooks the sleeping city of Rome. The world is asleep, but the cardinal is awake, and he is writing the words that will change history. Cardinal Bernardo Bibbiena was a man of the Renaissance. He was a man of logic, a man of art. He had stood before the works of Raphael and seen the sublime beauty of the human form. He believed in the order of the universe. He believed that God had placed the sun in the sky and man on the earth, and that there was a hierarchy of divine light, but that hierarchy had been shattered in the basement. He sat at his desk. The wood was old walnut polished to a deep shine, but tonight it felt cold to the touch. He looked at his hands. They were the hands of a prince of the church. They wore the rings of his office, gold and ruby, but now those rings felt heavy. They felt like shackles. He could not get the image of the glass king out of his mind. He could not forget the sound of the doctor's silver hammer ringing against the transparent bone. Ting, ting, the sound echoed in the silence of his study. He dipped his quill into the inkwell. The ink was made of lampblack and gum arabic. It was the blood of history. It was the medium through which truth was preserved, or through which lies were constructed. He began to write. My soul is heavy, he wrote. The letters were jagged. His handwriting, which was usually elegant and flowing, was cramped with fear. My soul is heavy because I have seen the face of the predecessor. He stopped. He looked at the word, predecessor. The church taught that there were no predecessors. Adam was the first. Before Adam there was the void, the waters, the Spirit of God moving over the face of the deep. But the thing in the vault was not from the void. It was from a civilization. It wore a crown. It sat on a throne. It had knowledge of the stars. If they were here before us, Bibbiena thought, then we are the usurpers. We are the invaders in their home. He continued to write. The doctor says it is made of glass, he wrote. He says it is a machine, a vessel for lightning, but I saw its eyes. Even empty, they watched me. I felt a presence in that room that was older than the stones of Rome. It was a cold intelligence. It did not hate me. It did not love me. It looked at me the way a gardener looks at a weed. The cardinal paused to wipe the sweat from his brow. The room was cold, but he was burning up. He realized then the true purpose of the Vatican's location. He stood up and walked to the bookshelf. He pulled down an ancient scroll. A map of the 7 hills of Rome. The Vatican Hill. Mons Vaticus. In ancient Etruscan legend, the name Vaticanus was related to prophecy, to the telling of the future. It was a place where the seers went to hear the voices of the gods. But what if they weren't gods? What if they were the glass kings speaking from their tombs, broadcasting their thoughts through the earth? Bibbiena realized that the voice of God that the ancient prophets heard might have been the hum of The silicon bones vibrating in the dark, he went back to the desk. He wrote faster now. The panic was rising in his throat. We have built our holy city on top of their transmitter, he wrote. We thought we were conquering pagan ground. We thought we were sanctifying the earth. But we were merely building a lid. The basilica is a capstone. The altar is a seal. We are not priests. We are wardens. He poured himself a glass of wine. His hand shook so much the red liquid splashed onto the parchment. It looked like a wound. He drank the wine in one gulp. It tasted like vinegar. He thought about the crown, the serpent crown. The serpents were intertwined. Their mouths were open. In the Bible, the serpent is the enemy, the deceiver, the one who brought knowledge that man was not ready for. But what if the serpent was not a devil? What if the serpent was a symbol of them? The Pre-Adamites, the ones who had the knowledge of genetic engineering, the ones who could grow bones of glass and wire nerves with gold. The cardinal felt a chill run down his spine. If the story of the Garden of Eden was true, then perhaps the apple was not a fruit. Perhaps the apple was the technology of the glass kings, and the fall of man was the moment we tried to use it. He realized that the church had been protecting humanity from this truth for 1,500 years. They had burned the books, not because they were heretical, but because they contained the blueprints. They had silenced the witches not because they worshiped Satan, but because they still remembered the old science. The Inquisition was not a religious war. It was a quarantine. Bibiana dipped the quill again. The tip scratched loudly against the paper. I fear for the Holy Father, he wrote. I fear for the church. We are sitting on a sleeping giant, and I fear that our prayers are merely the lullaby that keeps it asleep. He looked out the window. The moon had risen. It cast a pale light over the dome of the basilica under construction. Michelangelo was working on the dome. He was designing it to be the greatest structure in the world. Bibiana wondered if Michelangelo knew. Did the great artist know that his dome was actually a Faraday cage? A structure designed to block the signals coming from below? The cardinal had seen the plans. The lead lining, the specific geometry. It was all too precise. He wrote a name in the margin of the letter ALIDORO. The doctor. The man who had touched the bone. He must be silenced, Bibiana wrote. God forgive me, but he must be silenced. He has seen the biology of the gods. If he speaks, the world will unravel. The peasants will realize that they are cattle. They will realize that the divine right of kings is a lie. That true power belongs to the ones with the glass bones. The cardinal wept then. He wept for his own soul. He wept for the blood that would have to be shed to keep the secret. He knew that he was damning himself. By ordering the silence, he was becoming an accomplice to the cover-up. He was becoming a servant of the conspiracy, but he had no choice. If the world knew that there were beings who lived for thousands of years, beings who could channel the energy of the stars, humanity would lose its mind. There would be chaos. There would be worship of the new idols. The church had to stand firm. The lie had to be maintained. For the safety of the flock. He finished the letter. He melted the red wax over the fold. He pressed his ring into the hot wax. The seal of the cardinal, but as he pulled the ring away, he noticed something, the design on his ring. The family crest. It was a shield. And above the shield was a helmet. And on the helmet were two serpents. He stared at the ring. He had worn it for 20 years. It was an heirloom, passed down from his ancestors. The serpents on his ring were identical to the serpents on the crown of the glass. King. The room spun. Bibiana gasped for air. He clutched his chest, his own bloodline. The nobility of Italy, the families that controlled the church, the Medici, the Borgia, the Orsini, and his own family, the Bibiana. Where did their power come from? Why were they the ones chosen to rule? He remembered the rumors of the blue blood. The aristocracy, why blue? Because under the skin, the veins of the glass king looked blue against the translucent bone. He looked at his own hand again. He held it up to the candle flame. For a second, just a fleeting second, he thought he saw a shimmer, a translucence in his own finger. He screamed, a short stifled scream, but it shattered the silence of the room. He realized the ultimate. Horror, we are not just the wardens, he whispered to the empty room. We are the descendants. The church was not hiding the enemy. The church was the enemy. Or at least the hierarchy was. They were the hybrids that Alidoro had feared. They were the ones keeping the pure strain safe until the time was right. He grabbed the letter. He wanted to burn it. He wanted to destroy the evidence of his realization, but he could not. The truth had to be preserved. Even if only in the dark, he opened a secret drawer in his desk. A drawer with a false bottom. He placed the letter inside. He covered it with financial ledgers. He sat back in his chair. He was exhausted. He felt older than the ruins of Rome, though he knew now why the skeleton hummed. It was singing to its children, and its children were sitting in the palaces of Europe. Its children were wearing the red robes of the cardinals. He closed his eyes. But he could still see the glass skull. He could still see the spiral ear listening to the universe. He knew he would never sleep peacefully again. Every time he laid his head on the pillow, he would hear the vibration. He would hear the call, and he knew that sooner or later the call would be answered. The Department of Silence would be formed. He would make sure of it. Not to protect the world from the king, but to protect the king from the world. Because the king was family. The cardinal never spoke of the ring again. He never spoke of the serpents, but the letter remained in the desk waiting for a historian to find it centuries later. Yet there was one detail in the letter that we have not discussed. One specific line that the cardinal wrote in the margin with a trembling hand. He mentioned the crown, the serpent crown made of black metal. He wrote that when he looked closely at the metal, he saw it moving. It wasn't just technology. It was alive, and that crown is not lost. It is not buried. The cardinal's letter reveals exactly where they moved the crown, and why the current pope refuses to enter the room where it is kept. A crown is supposed to be a symbol of authority. A circle of gold and jewels that sits heavy on the brow of a king. But the object resting on the head of the skeleton in the Vatican vault was not a crown. It was a shackle. And it was not made of gold. It was forged from a black metal that drank the light of the torches and refused to give it back. When the cardinal ordered the crown to be removed from the skull, the air in the chamber dropped 20 degrees in a single second. The metal screamed. It was not a metaphorical scream. It was a high-pitched mechanical shriek that shattered the glass lens of the doctor's spectacles. The workmen who touched it with their bare hands did not burn. They froze. Frost instantly covered their skin as the crown siphoned the heat from their bodies to power itself. In that moment, the church understood the terrifying reality. This was not jewelry. This was a neural interface. A machine designed to bind the mind of the Glass King to a network that spanned the globe. And even though the king was asleep, the crown was wide awake, and it was looking for a new host. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the echo of that scream fade into the silence. Step away from the freezing cold of the vault and come with me into the warmth of the candlelight. We are moving deeper into the mystery now. The panic of the moment has passed, but the dread remains. It settles in the stomach like a heavy stone. We are in the private chambers of the Vatican treasury. The room is lined with velvet. The air smells of myrtle old coins. On a table in the center of the room sits a lead box, and inside that box waits the object that terrified a pope. Let us open the lid. Let us look upon the serpent. The removal of the crown had been a disaster. 2 Swiss guards had lost the feeling in their hands permanently. The nerve damage was total. It was as if the life force had been sucked out of their fingertips. But the cardinal was desperate. He needed to separate the king from his crown. He believed that the crown was the source of the hum, the source of the signal. They used iron tongs to pry it loose. It clung to the glass skull as if magnetized. When it finally popped free, the hum in the room stopped instantly. The skeleton went silent. The resonance died, but the crown itself began to hiss. They placed it on a stone table in the lower crypts. They brought in the master blacksmith of the Papal States, a man named Giovanni who had forged swords for kings and chalices for saints. He was a man of fire and iron. He understood metal, but he did not understand this. Giovanni stood over the crown. He wiped the soot from his face. He looked at the cardinal and shook his head. It is not iron, Your Eminence, he said. It is not steel. It is not silver. He struck it with a hammer. There was no clang, no ring. The hammer simply bounced off as if it had struck a wall of solid rubber. The metal absorbed the impact completely. Giovanni took a file made of hardened diamond dust. He tried to scratch the surface of the black metal. He rasped it back and forth for an hour. Sweat poured down his face. When he wiped the metal clean, there was not a scratch. The file was ruined. The diamond dust had been ground smooth, but the black metal remained perfect. Pristine. This is star metal, Giovanni whispered. It fell from the sky, or it was forged in a fire hotter than any we can make on earth. The cardinal stepped closer to examine the shape. The crown was formed of 2 serpents. But they were not the crude snakes of medieval art. They were anatomically perfect. Every scale was rendered with microscopic precision. The serpents were intertwined in a double helix, a shape that no one in the year 1520 should have recognized. We know today that the double helix is the shape of DNA, the blueprint of life, but to the cardinal it looked like 2 worms eating each other. The heads of the serpents met at the front of the brow. Their mouths were open, and in the space between their fangs there was a small empty socket, a place where a gem or a crystal should have been, but it was empty. The cardinal felt a strange compulsion. He wanted to put his finger in the socket. He wanted to complete the circuit. He pulled his hand back just in time. He noticed the eyes of the serpents. They were not carved. They were made of a red glass similar to the material of the skeleton's bones, and they were moving. It was subtle, a movement so slow that you would miss it if you blinked. But the cardinal stared. He watched the red eyes of the metal snake shift a fraction of a millimeter to the left, following the movement of the blacksmith. It is watching us, the cardinal whispered. Giovanni the blacksmith backed away. He crossed himself. Throw it in the furnace, he said. Melt it down. Turn it into a shapeless lump. We cannot have this thing in the house of God. The cardinal agreed. They took the crown to the great forges of the Vatican. The fires were stoked until they roared white hot. The bellows pumped air until the coals were blindingly bright. This fire could melt gold in seconds. It could turn iron into liquid soup. They grasped the crown with long tongs and thrust it into the heart of the fire. They waited. They expected to see the metal soften, to see the serpents lose their shape and dissolve into a puddle. But the crown did not melt. Instead, the fire began to change. The white flames around the crown turned blue, then purple, then black. The crown was not melting. It was eating the heat. It was absorbing the thermal energy of the forge. The temperature in the room began to drop. The blacksmith screamed as the fire in the furnace simply went out. The coals turned to gray ash in an instant. The crown sat in the center of the cold ashes. It was glowing now. A faint, pulsating blue light emanated from the scales of the serpents. It had fed. The cardinal realized then that they could not destroy it. They were dealing with a technology that thrived on energy. Any attempt to burn it or break it only made it stronger. They used heavy leather gloves to place it into a lead box. Lead was the only thing that seemed to dampen its field. They carried the box to the deepest part of the Castel Sant'Angelo, the fortress on the banks of the Tiber. They placed it in a room with walls 10 feet thick. But the story of the crown does not end in the dark. The cardinal was obsessed. He returned to the box night after night. He began to study the design of the serpents. He brought in a jeweler, a man who specialized in the crowns of the nobility. He asked the jeweler a simple question. "Have you ever seen this design before?" The jeweler trembled. He recognized the helix. He recognized the intertwining snakes. "Yes, Your Eminence," he said quietly. "I have seen it." Where the cardinal demanded. "On the crests of the great houses," the jeweler replied. "The Visconti of Milan, the Sforza, the Medici. They all use the serpent in their heraldry. They call it the Bestione, the serpent eating a child." The cardinal felt the room spin. The Bestione, the symbol of Milan, a giant serpent swallowing a man. The history books said it was a symbol of power, of defeating enemies. But looking at the crown, the cardinal saw the truth. The serpent wasn't eating the man. The man was emerging from the serpent. The crown was a birthing device, or a transformation device. The jeweler continued, his voice shaking. "There is a legend, Your Eminence, a legend among the goldsmiths. They say that the first crowns were not made by men. They say they were given to the first kings by the angels, and that those crowns allowed the kings to speak without words, to command the armies with a thought." The neural interface. The cardinal understood. The glass kings, the Pre-Adamites, did not use spoken language. They used the crowns to project their thoughts, to control their subjects, to command the technology of their time. And the great houses of Europe, the families that ruled the world they had, adopted the symbol of the serpent because they remembered. Deep in their genetic memory, they remembered the power of the crown, but there was a missing piece. The empty socket between the fangs of the serpent. The cardinal spent months searching the archives. He looked for drawings. He looked for descriptions of the crown when it was whole. He found a reference in a forbidden text seized from the Library of Constantinople. The text spoke of the eye of the storm, a stone that controlled the crown, a stone that acted as the key. Without the stone, the crown was just a receiver. With the stone, it was a weapon. The text said that the stone had been separated from the crown during the Great Cataclysm, the flood that destroyed the first cities. The crown had remained in Rome, but the stone, the eye, had been taken. Where was it taken? The text gave a coordinate, a description of a land far to the west. A land across the ocean that the map said did not exist. The Americas. The cardinal realized that the Spanish conquistadors who were sailing to the New World at that very moment were not just looking for gold. They were on a retrieval mission. Court y acudas, Pizarro. They were looking for the missing component of the crown. The cardinal sat in the damp room of the Castel Sant'Angelo, staring at the lead box. If they found the stone, if they brought it back and placed it in the socket of the Serpent Crown, the king in the glass vault would wake up fully. The hum would become a roar. The command would be sent, and the world of men would end. The world of the glass kings would begin again. The cardinal made a decision. He would never let the crown and the stone meet. He ordered the lead box to be buried beneath the altar of the private chapel in the castle. He ordered a prayer to be said over it every hour of every day. A sonic barrier to keep the metal asleep, but metal does not sleep. It waits, and the crown is still there. Visitors to the Castel Sant'Angelo today often report a strange sensation when they visit the lower chapels. They feel a pressure in their temples, a buzzing in their teeth. Some say they hear a high-pitched hiss like a snake in the grass. They are feeling the field of the crown. It is still active. It is still searching for a signal. And sometimes late at night the guards report that the temperature in the chapel drops. The breath turns to frost, and the shadows on the wall seem to twist like coiling snakes. The cardinal died knowing that he had only bought time. He knew that the crown wanted to be found. He knew that it was calling out to the blood of its creators. And he knew that somewhere across the ocean, the other half of the key was waiting. The Vatican thought they had solved the problem by hiding the crown, but they had only hidden one part of the machine. The conspiracy was global. And as the cardinal lay on his deathbed, he whispered one final warning. Do not let the pieces join. Do not let the eye open. But his warning was lost in the chaos of history. The crown waits in the dark, the black metal pulsating with a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of the earth. It remembers the head of the king. It remembers the feeling of the glass bone. And it hungers to be reconnected. To be whole again. The crown was safe in the lead box. Or so they thought. But you cannot hide a secret this big without creating a system to manage it. The cardinal's death left a vacuum, and the church realized that a single man could not hold back the tide of the ancient world. They needed an army. They needed a bureau, a specific department that existed outside of the law. And outside of the Bible, they created the most secretive organization in human history. A group of men who have no names and no faces. They are the ones who scrub the history books. They are the ones who silence the archaeologists. They are the Department of Silence. And their first mission wasn't to hide a bone or a crown. It was to erase a city. We know the names of the famous orders. The Jesuits, the Franciscans, the Knights Templar. But there is one order within the Vatican that has never appeared on any census. They do not hold public mass. They do not wear red robes or carry golden crosses. They wear gray wool and they walk in the shadows of the colonnades. They are the Officium Silenti, the Department of Silence. Founded in the wake of the discovery of the Glass King, their mandate was terrifyingly simple. They were not created to spread the word of God. They were created to murder the past. For 500 years, they have systematically destroyed every book, every map, and every artifact that proves humanity. Is not the first civilization on Earth when an archaeologist finds a skeleton that doesn't fit the timeline. It is the Department of Silence that arrives first. When a diver finds a pyramid underwater, it is the Department of Silence that confiscates the film. They are the reason our history books are empty. They are the architects of our amnesia, and the symbol they use to identify each other is a gesture you see every day. A finger pressed to the lips, the command to be quiet. This is the truth the king buried. Now let us step out of the light of the modern world. Let us leave behind the noise and the distraction. Imagine a corridor made of dark polished wood. The air here is cool and smells of beeswax and iron. There are no windows. The only light comes from lanterns that burn with a smokeless oil. You are walking down the hallway of the department. The floors are covered in thick carpets to muffle the sound of footsteps. Silence is not just a rule here. It is a religion. Breathe in the stillness. Let your mind drift back to the year 1521. The year the silence began, Cardinal Bibbiano was dead. The official story was a stomach ailment. The truth was that the burden of the Glass King had stopped his heart. But his death did not solve the problem. The crown was in the lead box. The skeleton was behind the wall. But the knowledge was leaking. Pope Leo X realized that a single cardinal could not contain a secret of this magnitude. The existence of the Pre-Adamites threatened the very foundation of the Church. If the world knew that genetic, engineered kings ruled the earth before Adam, the authority of the Vatican would collapse. So, in the middle of the night in a room, beneath the Sistine Chapel, the Pope summoned 5 men. They were not priests. They were scholars, assassins of the intellect, men who knew that the pen was far deadlier than the sword because the sword kills a man, but the pen can kill a memory. They took an oath that night. They swore on a Bible that had no words inside it, only blank pages. They swore to become the cleaners of history. They called themselves the Officium Silenti, the Office of Silence. Their headquarters was established not in the main palace, but in a forgotten tower near the Vatican gardens. A tower that had no entrance from the street, only a tunnel connecting it to the archives. Their first task was the map. The map found on the lap of the Glass King, the one describing the other cities. The head of the department was a man named Father Alessandro. He was a man with cold gray eyes who never smiled. He looked at the map. He saw the locations of the Pre-Adamite outposts. One was in Antarctica. One was in the Amazon. One was beneath the sands of Egypt. He did not send armies to these places. He sent cartographers. The Department of Silence began a massive operation to redraw the maps of the world. They recalled every map in the Vatican library. They scraped the ink off the parchment with razor blades. They erased islands. They moved mountains. They turned thriving ancient metropolises into blank spaces marked terra incognita, unknown land. They created the empty world myth. The idea that before us there was nothing but wilderness, but their work went beyond maps. They had to deal with the artifacts. Throughout the Renaissance, farmers were digging up strange things in their fields. Not just Roman coins, but strange gears made of non-rusting metal, skulls made of crystal, tablets with writing that looked like circuit boards. Before the Department of Silence, these objects were curiosities. They were put on mantles, talked about in taverns, but the department had eyes everywhere. They had spies in the market, spies in the universities. When a rumor of a devil's artifact surfaced, the agents in gray would arrive. They would pay the farmer in gold. Or if he refused to sell, they would pay him in steel. The artifact would disappear. It would be brought to the tower. Inside the tower, there is a room known as the Inferno. It is not a fire. It is a vault. A vault so deep that the pressure of the earth keeps the air heavy and thick. This is where the history of the world went to die. Shelves upon shelves of impossible objects. There are gears there that turn forever without a power source. There are lenses that show the stars in broad daylight. There are books written on sheets of gold that describe the genetic splicing of the human race. Father Alessandro spent his life in this vault, cataloging the truth while the world above lived in a lie. He realized something profound as he worked. He realized that the silence wasn't just about hiding the past. It was about protecting the human mind. He read the texts of the Glass Kings. He read about their psychic abilities, their hive mind, their cruelty. He realized that if humans knew the truth, they would try to wake them up. We would worship them. We would try to use their technology, and that would be our end. So the Department of Silence adopted a philosophy. Ignorance is survival. They became the guardians of the sleep. They infiltrated the other courts of Europe. They sent agents to the court of Henry VIII in England. To the court of Francis I in France, they whispered in the ears of kings. They encouraged the burning of witchcraft books. Not because they hated magic, but because magic was often just misunderstood. Technology from the previous cycle, the witches chanting in the woods weren't summoning demons. They were repeating corrupted verbal passwords to activate ancient machines. The department knew this. So the witches had to burn. One of the most chilling aspects of the department was their symbol. In ancient Rome, there was a god named Harpocrates, the god of silence and secrets. He was depicted as a young boy with his finger pressed to his lips. The department adopted this image when an agent approached a witness. When they approached a scholar who had found something he shouldn't have, they would simply stand in the doorway, dressed in gray, and they would press a gloved finger to their lips. It was a warning. Be silent or be silenced. This gesture bled into our culture. We teach it to our children. Be quiet. We think it means simply stop talking. But deep in our cultural memory, it triggers a fear response. It is the sign of the department. It is the sign that the watchers are present. The department also had a special unit for the New World. When Columbus sailed, when courts marched into Mexico, there were gray-robed priests with them. History tells us the conquistadors melted down the gold of the Aztecs because of greed, but the department records tell a different story. They melted down the gold because the statues were not gods. They were machines. The great golden discs of the sun god were components, transmitters. The department ordered them destroyed immediately. They burned the Aztec codices. Thousands of books of knowledge. We are told they burned them because they were pagan. But the department burned them because they contained the star charts of the Pre-Adamites. The Aztecs knew about the Glass Kings. They called them the white gods, who came from the stars. The department could not allow that knowledge to survive. So the bonfires of Mexico burned for weeks. The smoke was black and thick, and with every book that turned to ash, another piece of our true history disappeared. But the department's greatest challenge was the Vatican. Library itself, the library is vast. It has miles of shelves, and many of the librarians were innocent scholars. They didn't know about the conspiracy. So the department built a shadow library. They took the real books, the dangerous books, and moved them to the secret archives. Then they replaced them with forgeries. They hired monks to rewrite history, to copy ancient texts but change the dates, change the names, change the descriptions of the technology to sound like miracles or magic. A machine that healed the sick became a saint's relic, a weapon that fired light. Beams became a sword of fire. They translated science into mythology, and we believed them. We swallowed the myth because it was safer than the truth. Father Alessandro grew old in the dark. His skin turned gray like his robes. He stopped speaking entirely. He communicated only in written orders and hand signals. He had seen too much. He knew that despite their best efforts, they couldn't catch everything. The world is too big. The ruins are too deep. He knew that one day the earth would shift. An earthquake would crack a seal. A storm would wash away a cliff, and the face of a glass king would be exposed to the sunlight again. He wrote a final manual for his successor. A book bound in black leather. In it, he detailed the locations of the hot zones, the places where the barrier between our world and the previous world is thin. He wrote about the hum, the vibration that the agents could feel when they were near a pre-Adamite site, and he wrote about the psychological toll. He described how the agents of the department often went mad. They developed a condition called the glass delusion. They started to believe that they themselves were made of glass, that they would shatter if they moved too fast. It was a sympathetic resonance. Their minds were being infected by the objects they were guarding. The department had to build a sanitarium deep underground, a place to keep the agents who had lost their minds to the silence. They are still there, or their descendants are. The Department of Silence did not end with the Renaissance. It evolved. Today they do not use quill pens. They use algorithms. They scrub the internet. They alter digital archives. They make sure that certain photos are corrupted, that certain videos are deleted. If you have ever found a link to a history that disappears, if you have ever seen a photo of an artifact that vanishes from the web, you have brushed against the gray robes of the department. They are still watching. They are still listening, and they are still terrified of what is buried in the ice of Antarctica. Because the map that Father Alessandro tried to hide the map, that was taken from the lap of the skeleton, showed one city that was not in ruins. It showed a city that was marked as active. The department spent centuries redrawing the world. They thought they had covered every track, but there was one copy of the map they missed. A copy that had been smuggled out of the Vatican by a renegade monk before the department was fully formed. This map didn't just show the location of the cities. It showed the network, the ley lines that connected them. And most terrifying of all, it showed what those cities were built on top of. The map reveals that the great cities of the Pre-Adamites were not homes. They were caps. They were built to hold something down, something that was here even before the kings, and the map points to the biggest cap of all. A city built before Eden. We are taught that civilization began in Mesopotamia. We are taught that before the Sumerians, humanity was nothing more than scattered tribes of hunters living in mud huts. But the map that was resting on the lap of the Glass King in the Vatican vault tells a different story. It depicts a world that no modern geographer would recognize. It shows Antarctica not as a frozen wasteland, but as a lush green continent with rivers and mountain ranges that are currently buried under 2 miles of ice. It shows a land bridge connecting Europe to America. It shows the Sahara Desert not as a sea of sand, but as a network of massive lakes and savannas. But the most terrifying detail is not the geology. It is the cities. The map is covered in markers, hundreds of them, huge metropolitan centers located in places that we consider uninhabitable today. And in the center of the Middle East, where the Bible places the Garden of Eden, the map does not show a paradise. It shows a walled enclosure, a quarantine zone. The map proves that Eden was not the beginning of the world. It was merely a protected garden built amidst the ruins of a global empire that had already been destroyed. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the shock of the impossible geography fade. Let your mind drift away from the modern maps, Forget the lines on the globe. Forget the borders of nations. We are going back to a time when the world was whole. We are entering the gallery of maps in the Vatican, but we are not walking in the public hall where the tourists go. We are walking through a hidden door behind a tapestry. The air here is dry and smells of dust and cedar wood. The light is dim. It comes from oil lamps that cast long flickering shadows on the shelves. You are surrounded by the true history of the earth. Unroll the parchment in your mind. Smooth it out. Let us look at the world of the pre-Adamites. The map found in the vault was not made of paper. Paper rots. Papyrus crumbles. Vellum cracks. The Glass Kings did not trust their history to organic material. The map was created on a sheet of flexible metal. It felt like silk between the fingers, but it had the strength of steel. It was cool to the touch. It was a pale silvery blue color like the surface of a frozen lake. When the Jesuit scholars first examined it, they realized that the markings were not inked on the surface. They were etched into the molecular structure of the material. They shimmered. Depending on the angle of the light, different layers of information would appear. If you held it flat, you saw the coastlines. If you tilted it left, you saw the rivers. If you tilted it right, you saw the energy grid. It was a holographic record thousands of years before the invention of the hologram. The scholars called it the Carta Mundi Prioris. The map of the previous world, they laid it out on a long table in the secret archives. They placed heavy weights on the corners. They lit candles around it. And they began the work of comparing it to the known world. The first thing that struck them was the water levels. The coastlines on the map were different. Florida was twice its current size. The islands of Britain were connected to the mainland of Europe. The sea level was at least 300 feet lower than it is today. This confirmed the timeline. This map was made during the height of the ice age, a time when the water of the oceans was locked up in the great glaciers, but civilization is not supposed to exist in the ice age, we are told. That was the time of the cavemen, yet the map showed a global trade network. There were lines connecting the continents, shipping lanes, or perhaps flight paths. The center of this world was not Rome. It was not Jerusalem. It was not Beijing. The capital city. The place marked with the largest symbol, a double helix. Serpent was located at the bottom of the world. Antarctica. On the map, the continent was named Terra Vitrea. The land of glass. It showed a massive archipelago free of ice. In the center of the continent, surrounded by a ring of mountains, was a city. The map depicted it as a perfect circle divided into 12 sectors. The Jesuits looked at the map, and then they looked at their globes. They knew Antarctica only as a rumor. A frozen hell at the bottom of the earth, but the map showed forests. It showed a massive river system flowing from the central. mountains to the sea. In the 1950s, modern science would discover that these rivers actually exist. They are buried under the ice. We found them with radar. But the Vatican knew they were there in 1521. The map showed that the City of Glass was the power source. Lines of energy radiated out from the South Pole, connecting to other hubs around the planet. It was a grid, a planetary circuit board. The scholars traced the lines north. One line went to the jungles of South America, to the Amazon. Today we think of the Amazon as a pristine rainforest, a place of nature, but the map showed the Amazon as a sprawling industrial zone. It showed cities built in a geometric grid stretching for thousands of miles. It showed canals. It showed reservoirs. The jungle was actually a garden that had overgrown the ruins. The map labeled this region the City of the Jaguar. It depicted massive stone pyramids, not for worship, but for energy collection. The pyramids were placed directly on top of the Earth's magnetic lines. The Jesuits realized that the natives of the Amazon, who told stories of great white cities hidden in the trees, were not making up myths. They were remembering their ancestors' masters. The Department of Silence sent agents to the Amazon in the 16th century. They found the ruins. They found the walls made of the same black stone as the crown, and they ordered the jungle to be left alone. They knew that the roots of the trees would strangle the stones. They knew that nature was the best cover. Up. Let the forest eat the evidence. That was the command. The scholars moved their eyes across the Atlantic Ocean. The map showed a large island in the middle of the ocean, the island that Plato called Atlantis. The map called it Poseidon. It was shown as a hub, a bridge between the west and the east, but there was a red mark over the island, a symbol of destruction. The map had been updated. The Glass Kings had recorded the loss of their province. This terrified the Jesuits. It meant that the map wasn't just geography. It was a record of a war, or a cataclysm. They traced the line to Africa. The Sahara Desert. The map showed it as a lush savanna. It showed 3 massive rivers flowing across the sand. Rivers that are now dry. W80s. And along the banks of these rivers were cities. The map labeled this region the land of the Watchers. It showed towers, tall, thin towers that reached into the clouds. The Jesuits realized that the Sphinx, the Great Sphinx of Giza, was shown on this map, but it was not a lion. And it did not have a human head. On the map, the Sphinx was a dog, a jackal, Anubis, the guardian of the dead, and it was surrounded by water. This confirmed the heresy. The Sphinx was thousands of years older than the pharaohs. It had been built when rain still fell on Egypt. It had been built by the Pre-Adamites to guard the eastern flank of their empire. The water erosion on the Sphinx, which modern geologists fight about today, was a known fact to the Department of Silence 5 centuries ago. But the most disturbing part of the map was the Middle East. The cradle of civilization, the land of the Bible. The map showed this area, but it was different from the rest of the world. While the other cities were open and connected, the region of Mesopotamia was marked with a barrier, a wall. The map showed a fenced-off area between the Tigris and Euphrates. Rivers. Inside the fence, the map showed a lush garden, a laboratory. The label on this region translated to Hortus Clausus, the enclosed garden. Eden. The Jesuits felt a cold sweat on their necks. The Bible says God planted a garden in Eden. But the map suggested that Eden was a biodome, a controlled experiment created by the Glass Kings. It was not the birthplace of the world. It was a petri dish. It was where they created us. The map implied that while the Pre-Adamites ruled the global empire from their glass cities, they created a slave race, a worker race, and they kept them in the enclosed garden. Adam and Eve were not the first humans. They were the first Homo sapiens. The first genetically modified workers designed to serve the kings and the fall of man. The expulsion from the garden, the map hinted at the truth of that event as well. It showed a breach in the wall, a symbol of rebellion. We escaped. We didn't leave because we ate an apple. We left because the empire of the Glass Kings collapsed. The cataclysm that destroyed Atlantis, the flood that sank the continent of Mu, the ice that covered Antarctica. These events destroyed the masters, and the servants in the garden were left to fend for themselves. We wandered out of the ruins of Eden into a world that was broken. We found the remnants of the great cities. We found the pyramids. We found the Sphinx, but we had forgotten how to use them. We were like children playing in the wreckage of a starship. We built our mud huts next to their titanium towers. We worshipped their machines as gods. The Jesuits stared at the map in silence. They understood now why the church had to exist. The church was the institution created to manage the orphans of Eden, to give them a story, a purpose, to hide the terrifying truth that we are the leftovers of a dead civilization. The map of the previous world was too dangerous to exist. If the common man saw it, he would ask questions. He would ask why the King of France did not rule Antarctica. He would ask what was buried under the ice. He would want to go there. And if he went there, he might wake something up. Father Alessandro, the head of the Department of Silence, took the map. He did not burn it. You cannot burn star metal. He rolled it up. He placed it inside a tube made of lead. He walked to the deepest part of the Vatican archives, a section known as the Hell Well. It is a vertical shaft that goes down into the bedrock. He dropped the tube into the dark. It fell for a long time before they heard it hit the bottom, but the image of the map was burned into their minds. They made copies, simplified copies, distorted copies. Some of these copies leaked the famous Piri race map, the map of the Turkish admiral that shows the coast of Antarctica without ice. That was a fragment of the data. A copy of a copy that escaped the purge, the Orance Fine map. Another impossible map from the Renaissance that shows the southern continent in perfect detail. These were the leaks. The cracks in the dam of silence, but the original map, the holographic master key. It is still down there in the dark, and it is not just a map of geography. It is a map of time. The Jesuits noticed one last thing before they hid it. The map had a calendar system. A cycle. It showed the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the earth, and it marked the dates of the cataclysms, the destruction of the previous worlds. There was a pattern, a rhythm. The Department of Silence calculated the date of the next cycle. The next reset, they realized that the time of the Pre-Adamites was not over. It was merely paused. The ice would melt, the waters would rise, and the cities would emerge again. The map was not a history of the past. It was a forecast for the future. We are living on a clock, and the hands are moving closer to midnight. The Department of Silence knows this. That is why they are so desperate to keep us asleep. That is why they distract us with wars and politics. Because if we look down, if we look at the geology, if we look at the radar scans of the Amazon, if we look at the ice of Antarctica, we will see the lines of the grid. We will see the foundations of the glass. towers, and we will realize that the tenants are coming back to reclaim their property. The map shows a city in the Pacific Ocean, a massive underwater complex near the Mariana Trench. The map labels it the Sleeper's Tomb. Modern sonar has detected anomalies in that region. Sounds, bloops, low-frequency hums. We call them biological noises. Whales. Shifting plates, but the Department of Silence knows better. They know it is the hum of the city powering up. The map is the key. And the Vatican threw away the key, but they couldn't throw away the territory. The earth remembers. The stones remember. And every time a glacier calves into the sea, every time the rainforest is burned away to reveal a geometric mound, the map reveals itself again. We are walking on the roof of their house, and they are starting to knock from below. The map was hidden. The physical evidence was buried, but the Department of Silence had a problem. The human eye had already seen the truth. The artists of the Renaissance, the sculptors, the painters, they had access to the ancient knowledge before the crackdown was complete. The church couldn't kill them all. They were too famous, so they did something more clever. They hired them. They hired the greatest artist of the age, a man named Michelangelo, and they forced him to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. But Michelangelo was a rebel. He didn't paint the lie they wanted. He painted the truth in plain sight. And if you look closely at the most famous painting in the world, the creation of Adam, you will see that God is not floating in a cloud. He is floating inside a perfect anatomical drawing of a human brain. Michelangelo was leaving a message. Every year, millions of people walk into the Sistine Chapel and look up. They crane their necks to see the most famous image in human history. The creation of Adam. They see an old bearded God reaching out to give life to the first man. They see a masterpiece of faith, but they are looking at a lie. Or rather, they are looking at a code that they have been conditioned not to see. Michelangelo did not paint a religious scene. He painted a biological diagram. Look closely at the red cloak swirling around God. It is not a cloud. It is a perfect anatomical cross-section of a human brain. Every fold and every fissure matches the neurology of the mind. Michelangelo was telling us that God is not a spirit in the sky. He was telling us that our creators were masters of the mind, masters of genetics, and that the spark of life wasn't magic. It was a data transfer. The Pope paid for a Bible story, but the artist gave him a blueprint of the pre-Adamite design, and he did it while the Department of Silence watched from the floor below. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the crowds vanish. Let the chatter of the tourists dissolve into the silence of the 16th century. We are climbing the wooden scaffold, higher and higher above the marble floor. The air becomes warm and smells of wet plaster and linseed oil. The light is dim here. Only a few candles sputter on the wooden planks. You are alone with the master. He is lying on his back. His face is speckled with paint. His eyes are burning with a mixture of exhaustion and fury. He is a prisoner in this chapel, locked in with his demons, and he is about to paint the greatest secret of the Vatican onto the ceiling, where no one can erase it. The year is 1508. Pope Julius II has commanded Michelangelo Buonarroti to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo refused at first. "I am a sculptor," he said. "I am a man of stone, not of paint. I liberate figures from marble. I do not smear colors on a wall. But one does not say no to the Pope, especially not Julius the warrior Pope. So Michelangelo climbed the scaffold. But he carried a secret with him, a secret that had been whispered to him by the late Cardinal Bibbiena before the Cardinal Sutton. Death. Michelangelo had been granted access because he was the Vatican's greatest aesthetic asset. He had been allowed into the lower archives to study ancient forms. The church thought he was studying Roman statues. They thought he was looking at the Laocoon group to learn about muscles and tension, but Michelangelo had gone deeper. He had seen the sketches of the Glass King. He had seen the copies of the map of the previous world. He was a man who dissected corpses in the dark to understand the human body. He knew anatomy better than any doctor in Rome. He knew how the tendons attached to the bone. He knew the weight of the liver. He knew the shape of the brain. When he saw the records of the Pre-Adamites, he did not see demons. He saw anatomy. He realized that the beings who came before were the architects of the human form. The church wanted him to paint the book of Genesis. They wanted a simple story for the peasants. God makes light. God makes the earth. God makes man. Man sins. Man falls. Michelangelo decided to paint the story, but he decided to paint it from the perspective of the watchers. He began with the separation of light and darkness. The figure of God in these first panels is terrifying. He is swirling in chaos. His face is obscured. He looks like a force of nature, a cosmic storm. Michelangelo was painting the arrival of the Pre-Adamites from the stars, the chaotic entry into our atmosphere. Then he moved to the creation of the sun and moon. And then he reached the centerpiece, the creation of Adam. The Pope wanted a scene of divine love, a father reaching out to a son, but Michelangelo painted a laboratory. Look at Adam. He is lounging on the earth. He is fully formed. He is beautiful. He is strong, but he is limp. His hand hangs loosely. He has the body of a god, but he lacks the spark. He is a biological vessel that has not been activated. Now look at God. He is floating in a strange red shape against the white sky. For centuries, art critics said it was a mantle, a cloak blowing in the wind. But in 1990, a physician named Frank Meshberg published a paper that the Department of Silence had feared for years. He pointed out what Michelangelo had hidden in plain sight. The shape is a human brain. The outline of the cloak traces the frontal lobe, the brain stem, the pituitary gland. Even the vertebral artery is represented by a piece of green cloth hanging down. Why would Michelangelo put God inside a brain? Because he knew the truth of the Glass King. The Pre-Adamites were not spiritual gods. They were intellectual masters. Their power came from the mind, from the third eye, from the pineal gland. The God figure is leaning forward. He is focused, intense. He is not blessing Adam. He is initiating a neural connection. The fingers are not touching. There is a gap, a synapse. In neurology, a synapse is the gap between nerve cells where the signal jumps. Michelangelo painted the moment of the download, the moment the programming was transferred from the master to the slave. And look at who is with God inside the brain. There is a woman tucked under his left arm. She looks fearful. She is looking at Adam with wide eyes. The church says this is Eve waiting to be born, but in the context of the Pre-Adamite lore, she is something else. She is the genetic template, the clone source. She is safe inside the mind of the creator while the male prototype is being tested on the ground. Surrounding them are figures. The ignudi, the naked youths that sit on the corners of the architectural framework. These figures have puzzled historians for 500 years. They are not angels. They have no wings. They are not saints. They are nude and athletic. They act as observers. They hold medallions. They hold garlands of oak leaves and acorns. In the ancient world, the oak was the tree of knowledge, the tree of the Druids, the tree of the old gods. Michelangelo placed these 20 young men on the ceiling to represent the Watchers, the younger generation of the Pre-Adamites who stood on the walls of Eden and watched the experiment unfold. They look bored. They look restless. They twist and turn. They are waiting for us to wake up. Michelangelo spent 4 years on his back. Paint dripped into his eyes. It permanently damaged his vision. His neck was locked in a spasm of pain that would plague him for the rest of his life. He wrote a poem about his misery. "I've grown a goiter from this torture," he wrote. "My brush above me all the time dribbles paint on my face," but he kept painting. He was driven by a need to document the truth. He knew that the Department of Silence would destroy any book he wrote. They would burn any letter, but they could not burn the ceiling of the Pope's chapel. It was the perfect hiding place. The most public place in the world. He painted the drunkenness of Noah, a scene of degradation and shame. Because the map showed that the Great Flood was a cleanup operation. And the survivors like Noah were not the heroes. They were the traumatized remnants who had seen their world washed away. Michelangelo painted the Sibyls, the pagan prophetesses. He placed them on the same level as the biblical prophets. The Delphic Sibyl, the Cumean Sibyl, the Church allowed this because they believed the Sibyls had prophesied the coming of Christ. But Michelangelo painted them because they were the oracles of the old world. They were the ones who could hear the hum of the glass. King. Look at the Delphic Sibyl. Her eyes are wide. She is looking to the side. She looks terrified. She is not looking at the future. She is looking at the past. She sees the fire falling from the sky. The Department of Silence suspected him. Father Alessandro often visited the chapel during the painting. He would stand at the bottom of the scaffold and call up to the artist. "What are you painting up there, Buonarroti?" Just what His Holiness commanded. Michelangelo would shout back, but Alessandro knew better. He saw the strange shapes. He saw the focus on anatomy. He saw that the angels looked too much like the descriptions of the white gods in the forbidden texts, but he could not stop it. The Pope loved the work. The colors were vibrant. The figures were majestic. Pope Julius saw glory. He did not see the science, and that is the great irony. The Vatican paid for the very evidence that undermines their dogma. When the ceiling was unveiled on All Saints' Day in 1512, the crowds gasped. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was not static. It was alive. It was moving, but only a few initiated members of the secret orders saw the code. They looked at the brain. They looked at the gap between the fingers. And they understood. Michelangelo had painted the neural interface. He had painted the truth that we are biological machines, that our soul is a frequency that was gifted to us. Or perhaps stolen. Michelangelo lived to be an old man. He became reclusive. He burned many of his own drawings before he died. He was afraid that the sketches would reveal too much, but he left the ceiling and later he returned to paint the wall. The Last Judgment. And there he hid his final message. In the flayed skin of St. Bartholomew. Michelangelo painted his own face. It is a grotesque image. An empty skin hanging from the hand of a saint. He was telling us how he felt, that he had been hollowed out, that the truth had consumed him. He was a shell, just like the empty robes found in the Pre-Adamite tombs, the Department of Silence. learned their lesson after Michelangelo. They tightened their grip on the arts. The Council of Trent issued new rules for religious art. No more nudity, no more pagan symbols, no more hidden codes. They hired the breeches maker to paint underwear over Michelangelo's nudes. They tried to cover up the biology, but they couldn't cover the brain. It is too large. It is the central shape of the composition dot, so they relied on ignorance. They relied on the fact that people see what they are told to see. If you tell a man he is looking at God, he will see God. He will not see a frontal lobe. He will not see a pituitary gland, but next time you see that image, whether on a poster or on a screen, look at the red shape. Trace the outline and realize that the finger of God is not giving life. It is giving consciousness. It is turning on the switch, but the most terrifying part of Michelangelo's story isn't the creation. It is the destruction dot, because on the other side of the ceiling he painted the flood, he painted the water rising. He painted the panic. He painted people climbing the mountains to escape the rising tide, and he painted a boat. An ark dot, but the map on the Glass King's lap showed that the ark wasn't a wooden boat filled with animals. The map showed that the ark was a DNA bank, a heavily fortified vault designed to float out the catastrophe. Michelangelo hinted at this. His ark is rectangular. It looks like a box. A container and the people beating on the outside trying to get in, they are not sinners. They are the failed experiments. The ones who didn't make the cut. The flood wasn't rain. Michelangelo depicted the water rising, but he didn't depict why it rose. The church says God was angry, but the Department of Silence documents reveal that the Great Flood was a scheduled event. Cleanup operation triggered by the melting of the ice caps in the Pre-Adamite era. And the scary part isn't that it happened once. The scary part is that the mechanism that caused it is still active. The Glass King's map has a timer, and according to the artifacts found in the sediment layer of the flood, the water didn't just drown the world. It burned it first. We have been told a nursery rhyme about a boat and a zoo and 40 days of rain. We have been told that God sent the water to wash away sin. But the geological records hidden in the Vatican archives tell a different story. The Great Flood was not a weather event. It was an extermination event. It was a calculated, engineered reset of the planetary surface triggered by the Pre-Adamite kings when their genetic experiments began to fail. The map found in the vault confirms the exact date, 12,800 years ago. The mechanism was not rain from the clouds. It was a collapse of the hydroplate system beneath the crust and a bombardment from the sky. The fountains of the great deep were not poetic metaphors. They were coolant lines for the subterranean cities that were deliberately ruptured. The water burst forth with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs. The target was not mankind. The target was the hybrids, the giants, the biological mistakes that were roaming the earth. The ark was not built to save animals. It was a mobile DNA repository designed to preserve the pure strain while the surface was scrubbed clean. We are not the chosen ones. We are the descendants of the ones who were meant to drown. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the roar of the rushing water fade. Let the screams of the ancient world fall silent. We are safe here in the archive. The air is dry. The walls are thick stone. Outside the world is noisy, but in here time stands still. Imagine you are holding a jar of black dust. It is heavy. It smells of ash and crushed bone. It is the physical evidence of the day the world ended. Let us look closer at the dust. Let us understand what really happened when the waters rose. In the geological strata of the Earth, there is a distinct line, a scar that runs around the entire planet. Geologists call it the black mat, or the ocello horizon. If you dig down in North America, in Europe, in Syria, you will find it. Below this line you find the bones of the megafauna, the mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant sloths, and you find the evidence of a sophisticated culture. The Clovis people. Above this line there is nothing, just silence. For 1,000 years, the Vatican has known about the black mat for centuries, but they call it the Stratum of Judgment. Cardinal Bibbiena wrote about a sample of this soil that was kept in the Department of Silence. He described it as greasy to the touch and said it smelled of sulfur and deep ocean rot. The Church teaches that the flood was a miracle, a divine intervention, but the Glass King's records suggest it was a standard operating procedure, a cleanup. The Pre-Adamites were masters of genetics. We saw this in Michelangelo's painting. We saw the brain. We saw the neural interface, but genetics is a messy science. For every perfect creation like Adam, there are thousands of failures. The ancient texts, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, they all speak of a time when flesh was corrupted. They speak of the Watchers mixing their DNA with humans and creating monsters. The Nephilim, beings of immense size and insatiable hunger. The map in the Vatican shows that these beings had taken over the surface cities. They were consuming the resources. They were threatening the balance of the experiment, the Glass Kings realized. They had lost control. When a scientist in a lab realizes a virus has escaped containment, he does not pray. He sterilizes the room. He uses fire. He uses bleach. The flood was the bleach. The mechanism described in the secret texts is terrifyingly plausible. The Bible says, the fountains of the great deep were broken up. The Vatican archives interpret this. Literally, the map shows that the Earth's crust is not solid. It floats on a layer of pressurized water and magma. The Pre-Adamites used this thermal energy to power their cities. They had boreholes, massive vents that went down into the mantle. On the day of the cleanup, they reversed the flow. They triggered a resonance wave, a sound frequency sent deep into the earth. The same hum that the glass skeleton emits, but amplified 1 billion times. The crust cracked. Water did not just rise. It exploded upwards at supersonic speeds. It hit the upper atmosphere and froze instantly, turning into massive blocks of ice that fell back down like meteors. This explains why we find mammoths in Siberia frozen instantly with fresh buttercups still in their mouths. They weren't slowly frozen. They were flash frozen by a sudden atmospheric collapse. At the same time, the windows of heaven were opened. The Vatican astronomers believe this refers to the debris field, the remnants of a destroyed moon or a comet that the Pre-Adamites guided into the atmosphere. Fire from the sky while water rose from the earth. It was a pincer movement, a total sterilization. But the kings did not intend to die. They retreated. The map shows the locations of the arks. But in the Pre-Adamite language, the word for ark does not mean boat. It means box or container. The Ark of the Covenant is a box. Noah's Ark was a box. These were not wooden ships bobbing on the waves. They were hermetically sealed bunkers. Some were submersible. Some were buried deep in the mountains. The story of Noah is the story of a loyal servant. A human who had found favor in the eyes of the masters. He was given the schematics. He was told to build a container, but he wasn't saving 2 of every animal. That is physically impossible. He was saving the genetic codes. The vials. The embryos, the animals were data. Noah was the curator of the backup drive. When the water hit the surface world was obliterated, the great cities of the Amazon were covered in mud. The Sphinx in Egypt was submerged up to its neck, leaving the water erosion marks we see today. The land bridge to America was shattered. The Pre-Adamites in their glass cities under the ocean, and ice simply went to sleep. They waited for the turbulence to settle, but something went wrong with the plan. The devastation was greater than the simulation predicted. The sun was blocked out for years. The Earth entered a sudden ice age. The survivors on the surface, the humans who had climbed to the highest peaks of the Himalayas and the Andes, they were reduced to savagery. They forgot the old technology. They forgot the language of the kings. All they remembered was the water. This is why every culture on Earth has a flood myth, from the Maya to the Chinese to the Sumerians. It is the one universal memory of the human race. The trauma of the cleanup. We are the children of the refugees. We are the descendants of the ones who were not invited. Into the bunkers, we survived on the mountaintops, eating roots and hiding in caves, while the gods slept below us. And when the waters finally receded, the world was empty. The great machines were broken. The towers were toppled. The rainbow that appeared in the sky, the covenant that God made never to flood the earth again. The Department of Silence documents suggest this was not a promise of mercy. It was a stabilization of the atmosphere. The shield had been repaired. The climate control system was back online. But the kings did not return immediately. They stayed in stasis. Perhaps the damage to their cities was too great. Perhaps they are waiting for the radiation to clear. Or perhaps they are waiting for the population to regrow. So they have a workforce ready for their return. The Vatican knows this. They know that the second coming might not be a spiritual event. It might be the opening of the bunker doors. There is a jar in the secret archives labeled Aqua Diluvi. Water of the flood. It was collected from a sealed geode found in Mount Ararat. The water inside is black. It is viscous. When they tested it in the 1950s, they found it contained high levels of iridium, an element found in asteroids. And it contained biological matter, not bacteria, but complex chains of artificial DNA. The water itself was a weapon, a biological solvent designed to break down the corrupted flesh of the giants and return it to the earth. This is why the soil in certain ancient places is so fertile. It is composted NEPHIL. The Department of Silence guards the truth of the flood because it reveals the precariousness of our existence. We are not the masters of this planet. We are the tenants living in a building that has been fumigated before, and it can be fumigated again. The Glass King on the throne, the map of the previous world, the brain on the ceiling, the flood. They are all connected. Asterisk, they tell the story of a civilization that treats the earth like a laboratory. And when the experiment goes wrong, they hit the reset button. The alarming thing is the timeline. The cycle of the precession of the equinoxes is 26,000 years. The halfway point is 13,000 years. The flood happened 12,800 years ago. We are due. The Department of silence watches the ice shelves of Antarctica. They watch the seismic monitors in the Pacific. They know the signs. The last time it started with a hum, a vibration in the bedrock, and then the water turned black. But there is one thing that survived the flood intact. One piece of technology that did not go into the bunkers and did not get destroyed. It was found by the Knights Templar under the ruins of the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. It was not a weapon. And it was not a crown. It was a device designed to record the sound of the destruction. And it is still running. The flood destroyed the cities, but it couldn't destroy the vibration. The hum of the earth cracking open was captured by a specific artifact, a resonator. When the Templars found it, they realized it wasn't just a recording. It was a live feed. The device was still connected to the source of the water. And deep within the Vatican vaults today, that artifact is still humming. But recently the pitch changed. The sound is getting higher. The frequency is rising. And the Department of Silence believes it is a countdown. There is a sound in the deepest level of the Vatican that has never stopped for 700 years. It is not a prayer. It is not a chant. It is a low mechanical drone that vibrates at 19 hertz. This frequency is known to cause fear and hallucination in the human brain. The source of this sound is not a machine built by modern science. It is an artifact brought to Rome by the Knights Templar in 1312. History tells us the Templars were burned for worshipping a demon head called Baphomet. But the Department of Silence records reveal the truth. Baphomet was not a demon. It was a device. A dodecahedron made of black star metal that acts as a seismic monitor for the entire planet. It was found beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple, where the Pre-Adamites had buried it, to monitor the stability of the Earth's crust. The Templars didn't worship it. They were listening to it. Because the artifact speaks. It translates the movements of the tectonic plates into audio. And right now the pitch is rising. The earth is screaming. And the artifact is amplifying the warning. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the vibration settle in your chest. Let the fear of the sound fade into curiosity. We are descending again. Deeper than the archives, deeper than the crypts. We are going to the place the cardinals call the Silentium. It is a room lined with lead and acoustic foam. It is designed to dampen sound, but nothing can truly silence the object inside. Imagine you are standing in the center of this room. The air is thick. It feels charged like the air before a lightning storm. In the center of the room, on a pedestal of white marble, sits the object. It is small, geometric, dark, and it is alive with energy. Let us listen to its story. In the year 1189, knights arrived in Jerusalem. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, and of the Temple of Solomon they told the world they were there to protect pilgrims on the road to the holy city. But this was a cover story. For 9 years, these 9 men did not protect a single pilgrim. They did not patrol the roads. They did not fight the Saracens. They dug. They established their headquarters on the Temple Mount, directly above the ruins of the ancient Temple of Solomon. They had a map, a copy of the same map we discussed earlier, the map that showed the hot zones. They knew that Solomon's temple was not just a house of worship. It was a containment facility. King Solomon was known in legend as a master of magic, a man who could command demons to build his temple, but the demons of Solomon were machines. The shamir, the worm that could cut stone, was likely a laser or a sonic tool. The Templars were looking for the power source, They dug through the limestone bedrock. They descended into the system of caves and cisterns that honeycombed the mountain. In the year 1127, they found it. It was not gold. It was not the Ark of the Covenant. It was a chamber that the walls of the chamber were lined with a piezoelectric crystal, quartz. When the knights entered, their torches flickered and went out. But the room was not dark. It was illuminated by the object in the center. It was a geometric shape, a dodecahedron, 12 pentagonal faces. It was roughly the size of a human head. It was made of the same black material as the Serpent Crown, the star. Metal. But unlike the crown, which was cold, this object was vibrating. One of the knights reached out to touch it. When his skin made contact with the metal, he did not burn. He fell to his knees. His eyes rolled back in his head. He began to speak, but he was not speaking Latin or French. He was speaking numbers, coordinates, frequencies. He was channeling the data stream. The other knights pulled him away. He was shaken. He said he had seen the earth from the inside. He said he could feel the magma moving like blood in veins. They realized they had found the heart of the world, or at least a monitor attached to it. They packed the object in wool and leather. They smuggled it out of Jerusalem. This was the beginning of the Templar power. They brought the object to Europe. They discovered that the hum of the device could predict the future, not the future of politics, but the future of the earth. It could predict droughts. It could predict storms. It could predict earthquakes. This gave the Templars an immense advantage. They knew when the harvest would fail. They knew when the shipping lanes would be dangerous. They became the bankers of Europe because they had insider trading information provided by a pre-Adamite computer, but they made a mistake. They began to venerate the object. They called it Baphomet. Scholars have argued about this name for centuries. Some say it is a corruption of Muhammad. Some say it is a code for Sophia or wisdom, but in the Department of Silence files, Baphomet is an acronym, a technical designation derived from the Pre-Adamite language. Base phonometer, device for measuring the base sound of the earth. The Templars built their commanderies in specific locations. If you look at a map of Templar sites in France, they form a geometric pattern, a star map on the ground. They were building a network to amplify the signal of the Baphomet. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to know the ultimate secret, the date of the next reset, but the artifact had a side effect. Prolonged exposure to the hum altered the brain chemistry. The knights who guarded the object began to change. They became paranoid. They stopped sleeping. They claimed they could hear the thoughts of others. The idolatry they were accused of was actually their obsession with the device. King Philip of France and Pope Clement V destroyed the order in 1312, not because of heresy, but because they wanted the device. The king wanted the money. The Pope wanted the technology. On Friday the 13th, the raids began. The Templars were arrested, tortured, burned. But the Grand Master Jacques de Molay had anticipated this. The Baphomet had warned him. He had sent the device away. It was hidden on a wagon covered in hay. It moved through the back roads of France. It crossed the Alps in winter, but the Vatican had its own agents. The Department of Silence was waiting. They intercepted the wagon in a mountain pass near Turin. They killed the Templar guards. They took the box. When the agents opened the box, the hum knocked them unconscious. They had to bring in deaf servants to handle it. Men who could not hear the 19 hertz frequency, they brought it to Rome. They placed it in the vault. and there it has sat for 700 years. The Department of Silence has studied it. They have mapped its surface. They found that the 12 faces of the dodecahedron correspond to the 12 tectonic plates of the Earth. When an earthquake happens in Japan, the face corresponding to the Pacific plate glows. When a volcano erupts in Iceland, the North Atlantic, face gets warm. It is a real-time dashboard of the planet's geology, but it is the sound that worries them. For centuries, the sound was a low, steady thrum, like a large cat purring. It was stable, but in the early 20th century, the pitch began to change around the time of the Tunguska event in 1908. The device let out a screech that cracked the plaster in the vault. Since then, the frequency has been slowly rising. It is moving out of the infrasound range and into the audible range. The guards outside the vault say it sounds like a choir now. A choir of metal voices singing a discordant note. The Department of Silence believes that the device is reacting to a change in the Earth's core. The Pre-Adamites built their civilization on the manipulation of the Earth's magnetic field. They used the core as a dynamo. The artifact suggests that the dynamo is speeding up, or perhaps reversing. Magnetic pole shifts are a known scientific phenomenon. The North Pole becomes the South. The South becomes the North. When this happens, the protective shield of the Earth weakens. Solar radiation pours in. The climate goes into chaos. The map says this is how the last world ended. And the Baphomet is counting down to the next one. The department has tried to dampen the sound. They have wrapped the device in lead, in rubber, in gold, but the sound passes through everything. It is a scalar wave, a longitudinal wave that moves through matter without resistance. It permeates the Vatican. Some say that the strange behavior of certain popes can be attributed to the hum, the sudden resignations, the visions. Living on top of a sonic weapon takes its toll, but there is another theory. A darker theory proposed by a renegade physicist who worked for the department in the 1980s. He suggested that the artifact isn't just a monitor. He suggested it is a beacon. As the pitch rises, it sends a signal out into space. It is calling the masters back. The nursery is ready. It is saying, the harvest is ripe. The physicist disappeared shortly after writing his report. But his theory remains. The device is powered by the Earth, but it talks to the sky, and recently the sky has been answering. The Vatican astronomers have detected signals coming from deep space, signals that match the exact frequency of the artifact. They are getting closer. The Templars knew this. That is why they were not afraid to die. They knew that death was just a transition. They knew that the reality we see is a simulation maintained by the machines of the old world. Jacques de Molay cursed the king and the pope from the flames. He said they would join him before the year was out. And they did. Some say the curse was magic. But perhaps the Grand Master used the device one last time before he was captured. Perhaps he tweaked the frequency. Perhaps he aimed the dissonance at the hearts of his enemies. The artifact is a weapon if you know how to play it. And it is still humming. If you visit Rome today and you stand in St. Peter's Square late at night when the traffic has died down, put your hand on the obelisk. In the center of the square, the obelisk is an ancient Egyptian stone. It acts as a tuning fork. If you are very still, you can feel it. A faint vibration, a pulse that comes from deep underground. Thrum, thrum, thur, it is the heartbeat of the BAPHOMET is reminding us that the ground beneath our feet is not solid. It is a machine. And the machine is waking up. The Department of Silence is terrified because they don't know how to turn it off. They don't know where the off switch is. They have tried to freeze it. They have tried to bury it in concrete, but the pitch keeps rising, and now the astronomers are involved. Because the artifact has started to synchronize with something. It is no longer humming a random tune. It is humming in time with a pulsar. A specific star system in the Sirius sector, the dog star, the star that the Egyptians worshipped. The star that the Pre-Adamite map points to as the origin point. The connection has been re-established. The artifact is the receiver. But who is the sender? The Department of Silence couldn't look at the sky themselves, so they created a separate division. An observatory that is not listed on any university registry. They staffed it with Jesuit astronomers who are sworn to secrecy. These men don't look for God in the heavens. They look for the fleet. And the telescope they use isn't looking at light. It's looking at something the department calls the old stars. And what they found hiding behind the shadow of Jupiter has made the Pope consider opening the secret archives to the world.ai. Optimization. I have removed all ellipses and used standard punctuation, periods, commas, to ensure the AI narrator maintains a steady, authoritative, and hypnotic rhythm, real-world hook. This script utilizes the real-life telescope instrument located in Arizona but Vatican-affiliated, which is a massive topic of interest for American conspiracy theorists. This guarantees high engagement, lore integration. It connects the physical archaeology of the previous videos, the bones, the map, with the cosmic scale of the story. Why does the Vatican own one of the most powerful telescopes on Earth? And why did they build it on a sacred Apache mountain in Arizona? Instead of in Rome, the official story is that they are studying the evolution of the universe. But the instrument they use is named LUCIFER, the Large Binocular Telescope. Near-infrared utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. The Church claims the acronym is a coincidence, but the Department of Silence does not believe in coincidences. This device was built to see what the human eye cannot. It detects the infrared heat signatures of objects that are cold and dark, objects that do not reflect light. The Jesuits are not looking for God in the heavens. They are tracking an approach vector. They are tracking the return of the old stars. The constellations that the Pre-Adamites use for navigation are shifting back into alignment. And the object hiding in the shadow of Jupiter has finally started to move against the gravity of the solar system. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the cold wind of the mountain fade. Let us step inside the dome. The air is cool and conditioned. It smells of ozone and machine oil. The great eye of the telescope is open to the night sky. It stares unblinkingly at the black void. You are standing next to a man in a black robe. He is a Jesuit, a soldier of Christ. But he is also a scientist. He is watching a monitor that shows a grid of green lines. He is waiting for a blip, a signal. Let us look over his shoulder. Let us see what the Vatican has been watching for 500 years. The Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. They are known as the schoolmasters of Europe, the intellectuals. The missionaries but their secret mandate, given to them by the Department of Silence in the 16th century, was astronomy. Why? Has the Vatican always been obsessed with the Stars. From the Gregorian calendar to the Vatican Observatory. At Castel Gandolfo, the Church has invested more money in astronomy than any other religious institution. On Earth. We are told this is to determine the date of Easter, but you do not need $1 billion infrared telescope to find Easter. You need it to find the fleet. The map found on the lap of the Glass King showed the Earth, but the borders of the map showed the sky. The stars on the map were different. The pole star was not Polaris. It was Vega. The constellations were shifted. This is due to the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year wobble of the Earth, but the map marked specific stars as origins. Sirius, the Pleiades, Orion. These were the home systems of the Pre-Adamites, or at least the direction from which they came. The Jesuits realized that the Glass Kings were not just terrestrial rulers. They were colonists, and like any colonists, they maintained a link to the motherland. The old stars referred to in the department files are the stars that were visible when the Pre-Adamites landed. The Jesuits realized that the pyramids of Giza, the temples of Teotihuacan, the stone circles of Stonehenge, they were all aligned to these old stars. They were landing pads or targeting beacons when the Department of Silence confiscated the artifacts from the Incas and the Aztecs. They found gold discs that were not calendars. They were orbital trajection calculators. They showed the path of a specific object that enters our solar system every few thousand years. The Sumerians called it Nibiru. The crossing planet. The Jesuits call it the visitor. In the 1980s, the Vatican expanded its operations. They realized that the optical telescopes in Italy were not enough. Light pollution was hiding the truth. They needed a location that was high, dry, and spiritually significant. They chose Mount Graham in Arizona. The Apache people protested. They said the mountain was a portal, a place where the star people used to come down. The Vatican ignored the protests. They fought a legal battle to build their observatory right on top of the portal. Why? Because they needed to be exactly where the star people landed. They needed to look up through the same corridor. They built the VATT, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, and they partnered with other agencies to build the LUCIFER instrument. The name is a mockery, or perhaps a confession. Lucifer means light bringer. Asterisk, the instrument looks for the light that is hidden in the dark. And what have they found? The Jesuit astronomers do not publish their real findings in scientific journals. They send encrypted reports directly to the Holy See. These reports speak of anomalies in the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt is the ring of icy debris at the edge of our solar system. The Jesuits found that some of the ice is not ice. It is metal. They found objects that do not tumble randomly. They move with purpose. They correct their course. They are autonomous drones, leftovers from the war that destroyed the Pre-Adamites. The Jesuits believe that these drones are waking up. Just like the Baphomet device in the vault, the signal from the Earth is reaching the edge of the system, but the most terrifying discovery is closer to home. The Black Knight satellite conspiracy. Theorists have talked about the Black Knight for decades. A dark object in a polar orbit that has been there since before Sputnik. The Jesuits have high-resolution images of it. It is not a rock. It is not space junk. It is a sarcophagus. Asterisk, it is a containment unit. Just like the Ark, just like the vault. But it is in orbit. The Jesuits believe it contains the body of a high commander of the Pre-Adamites. one who was put into stasis in the vacuum of space to survive the flood, and the LUCIFER telescope has detected heat coming from the Black Night. The sarcophagus is warming up. Father Malachi Martin, a real Jesuit priest who worked in the Vatican. He hinted at this before he died. He said that the Vatican knows what is coming. He said that the third secret of Fatima was not about a war on earth. It was about a war from the sky. He said that the Pope has a red file that details the contact protocols. Asterisk. What do you do when the angels return? And they are not benevolent. The Jesuits have been studying the old stars. To calculate the arrival time, they watch the star Betelgeuse. It has been dimming recently. Astronomers say it might explode, but the Jesuits know that the dimming is artificial. Something is moving in front of the star. Something massive. A Dyson swarm, or a fleet blocking the light. The scale of the conspiracy is galactic, but the connection is biological. Remember the glass bones? The silicon lattice. The Jesuits discovered that this biology is suited for space travel. Humans are fragile. Radiation kills us. Zero gravity weakens our bones, but a skeleton made of glass? A nervous system made of gold wire? Asterisk, that is a body designed to live in the void. The Pre-Adamites were the astronauts. We are the cargo, and the Jesuits are the traffic controllers. They are watching the shadow of Jupiter. In 2009, an object impacted Jupiter. NASA said it was an asteroid, but the Vatican footage shows the object slowing down before impact. It shows the object turning. It was a scout ship. It was testing the defenses of the solar system. The old stars are aligning again. The cycle is completing. The Department of Silence has ordered the construction of a new archive. Not in Rome, but in the mountains of New Mexico, near the observatory. They are moving the most critical artifacts. The crown, the map, the BAPHOMET. They are moving them to the landing zone because when the visitors arrive, they will want their property back. The Jesuits walk the halls of the observatory at night. They chant in Latin. Stella Maris, Star of the Sea, guide us. But they are not praying for guidance. They are praying for mercy. They look at the monitors and they see the red dots moving closer. 1 dot. 2 dots. 1,000 dots. The sky is full of eyes, and they are all looking at the Vatican, the telescope. CIFER is not just looking. It is signaling. It uses an infrared laser to correct for atmospheric distortion. That is the official use, but the laser is pulsing. It is sending a binary code into the dark. It is sending the coordinates of the king. He is here, the laser says. He is waiting. The betrayal is not that the church hid the aliens. The betrayal is that the church is working for them. They are the ground crew, and they have prepared the way. The Jesuit astronomers are the high priests of the new age. An age that will look very much like the old age. An age of glass towers and silent slaves. You can buy a telescope today. You can look at the moon. You can look at Jupiter. But you cannot see what they see, because they are looking in the frequency of the dead, and the dead are coming home. The telescope sees the approach. The Baphomet hears the approach. But there is one final piece of the puzzle that confirms who is coming. The signal that the Jesuits received wasn't just math. It was a language, but it wasn't a language spoken by any living human. It was a dead language. A language that had been carved into the walls of the original Pre-Adamite vault in 1520, the Department of Silence, had never been able to translate the warning on the wall until the sky spoke it back to them. And the translation isn't a greeting, it's an eviction notice. For 500 years, the Vatican stared at the writing, carved into the wall of the Pre-Adamite vault. They traced the sharp angular symbols with their fingers. They copied them into books. They brought in the greatest linguists of every age to decipher them. But the message remained a mystery. It was a lock without a key. But when the LUCIFER telescope received the binary burst from the shadow of Jupiter, the computer algorithms realized something impossible. The signal from space was not random noise. It was a syntax. It was the grammar of the dead language on the wall. The Department of Silence finally translated the inscription in the year 2012. They expected a prayer. They expected a prophecy. Instead, they found a legal notice. The writing on the wall was not religious. It was a statement of ownership. It listed the earth not as a home, but as a manufacturing facility. And the final line of the carving was an eviction notice. It stated clearly that when the cycle is complete, the biological assets, meaning us, will be liquidated. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the cold realization sink in. Let the noise of the modern world fall away. We are returning to the silence of the stone. Imagine you are holding a candle. You are standing inches away from a wall of black basalt. The flame illuminates the carvings. They are deep. They are precise. They look like scars cut into the skin of the world. Run your eyes over the shapes. They are not like the letters you know. They are sharp, geometric, alien. Let us try to read what has been written for us. When Cardinal Bibbiena first entered the vault in 1520, he noticed the writing immediately. It surrounded the throne. It spiraled up the columns. It was etched into the base of the jars. He was a learned man. He read Latin, Greek, Hebrew. He had seen Egyptian hieroglyphs, but this was different. The symbols were three-dimensional. They varied in depth. A shallow cut meant one thing. A deep cut meant another. It was a language of shadows. You could only read it if the light hit it from a specific angle. The Department of Silence named it lingua vitrea, the glass tongue. For centuries they tried to break the code. They brought in a man named John Dee in the 16th century. Dee was the court astronomer to Queen Elizabeth I of England. He was also a magician, a man who claimed he could speak to angels. The Vatican gave him a copy of the symbols. Dee studied them for years. He called it the Enochian language, the language of the angels. He wrote that the symbols were not just letters. They were circuit diagrams. He said that speaking the words aloud produced a physical vibration in the air. He claimed that the language itself was a power source, but Dee went mad. He said the angels were screaming at him. He burned his books. The code remained unbroken. The Department of Silence realized that the language was not based on human vocal cords. It contained sounds that we cannot make. Clicks, whistles, sub-bass frequencies. It was a language designed for the spiral. Ear of the Glass King. They realized that the writing on the wall was likely a telepathic prompt, a set of symbols designed to trigger information directly in the brain of a pre-Adamite. But to a human, it was just gibberish. Until the signal detected by the Jesuit. Astronomers in Arizona provided the Rosetta Stone. The transmission from the old stars contained a repeating sequence, a header and a footer. The Vatican supercomputer recognized the pattern. It matched the geometric ratios of the carvings in the vault. The Department of Silence fed the image of the wall into the translation software. It took 3 Days for the machine to process the linguistic drift of 12,000 years. When the translation appeared on the screen, the head of the department, Father Alessandro, reportedly wept. The text was not poetry. It was not a holy scripture. It was a bureaucratic log. The writing on the wall identified the facility. Outpost Sol3 Genetics Division, Sector 7. It listed the inventory. Primary resource, carbon-based bipedal units. Status, unstable. This referred to us. To humanity, the writing confirmed that we were not created in the image of God. We were created as a workforce, a self-replicating biological machine designed to mine gold, to harvest silica, to build the infrastructure for the masters. But the inscription went deeper. It detailed the containment breach that led to the flood. It described how the units, us, had become corrupted by solar radiation, how our lifespans had shortened, how our telepathic receptors had atrophied. We were broken tools. The writing described the decision to archive the project. This was the terrifying part. To archive a project meant to freeze it, to flood the surface, to retreat to the bunkers, but it also outlined the reactivation protocol. The writing stated that the facility would be left on standby mode for 1 great year, 26,000 years. During this time, the units would be allowed to feral, to multiply on the surface, to maintain the biosphere. We were the caretakers. We were the weeds allowed to grow to keep the soil from eroding. But the final paragraph of the carving was the warning. It listed the criteria for the return of the owners when the magnetic field weakens, when the ice caps recede, when the atmospheric carbon reaches optimal density. The fleet will return to reclaim the assets. The Department of Silence looked at the data. The magnetic field is weakening now. The ice caps are receding now. The carbon levels are rising now. We have unknowingly prepared the terraforming for them. We have warmed the planet up just the way they like it. The warning on the wall ended with a specific phrase. The lease is temporary. The ownership is eternal. This shattered the theology of the church. The Bible says the earth was given to man. Be fruitful and multiply. Subdue the earth. But the lingua vitria says the earth was lent to man, and the rent is due. The translation explained the strange behavior of the crown and the Baphomet. They were not just machines. They were property markers, LoJack systems for a planetary asset. The Department of Silence realized that every cathedral they built, every prayer they said, it was all just a way of passing the time in. The waiting room. The translation also shed light on a famous biblical story. The writing on the wall at the feast of Belshazzar. Mene tekel, Upharsin. God has numbered the days of your kingdom. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. The department now believes that Belshazzar saw a projection of the glass tongue, a holographic warning from the Pre-Adamite systems. He had raided the temple vessels. He had touched the technology he didn't understand, and the system flagged him for termination. That same warning is now flashing for all of us. The signal from the sky matches. The writing in the vault. It is a handshake. A synchronization. The computer in the Vatican calculated the timeline based on the text. The restructuring phase begins when the signal acts as a key to unlock the sleeper cells. The sleepers are the glass kings in the tombs. The writing says, the monarch shall rise from the crystal sleep, and the herds shall be called. The herds, that is the word they use for Nations. The Department of Silence has kept this translation the most guarded secret of the modern age. If the world knew that we are considered herds by a superior intelligence, there would be mass panic. Governments would collapse. Religions would dissolve. So they keep the silence, but they have changed their strategy. Since 2012, the Vatican has been moving assets. They are not building more churches. They are buying gold. They are buying land in high-altitude regions. They are following the instructions in the warning list. Safe zones, areas that will be spared during the liquidation. These zones are not chosen for their beauty. They are chosen for their utility to the returning fleet. The department is positioning itself to be the collaborators, the trustees who hand over the keys when the masters arrive. They hope that by serving the Glass Kings they will be spared the culling. They hope to be the house slaves rather than the field slaves, but the writing on the wall is cold. It offers no guarantees. It simply says compliance is mandatory. Resistance is deletion. The carving is deep. It has survived 12,000 years of darkness. And now the light of the LUCIFER telescope has illuminated it. The connection is made. The circuit is closed. The warning is no longer passive. It is active. The hum in the vault has synced with the rhythm of the words, and the Department of Silence waits. They stand in the archives reading the eviction notice over and over again, hoping to find a loophole, hoping to find a clause that allows humanity to survive. But the Pre-Adamites were not lawyers. They were engineers. And engineers do not negotiate with broken tools. They replace them. The translation proves we are property. It proves we are squatters. But there is one final secret that the Department of Silence holds. A secret that even the Glass Kings might have underestimated. It concerns the unstable status of the human race. The reason we were marked for destruction wasn't because we were weak. It was because we were changing. We were evolving beyond the parameters of the design. We developed something they didn't account for. Something that might give us a fighting chance when the sky opens. And the final subtitle of our story reveals exactly what that weapon is. We walk the earth with the confidence of owners. We draw borders on maps. We sign deeds for land. We build skyscrapers and claim we have conquered the sky. But the legal documents found in the Vatican vault tell a different story. They reveal that humanity does not hold the title to this planet. We are merely tenants. And we are bad tenants. We have built our mud huts on top of their nuclear reactors. We have forgotten the maintenance codes. We have let the garden grow wild. The Department of Silence knows the terrifying truth. The silence of history is not peace. It is the silence of an empty house waiting for the owners to return from a long journey. And now the lights are flickering in the driveway. The key is turning in the lock. The Pre-Adamite kings are not invaders. They are the landlords. And when they walk through the door, they will not see us as rulers. They will see us as an infestation that needs to be cleared. This is the truth the king buried. Now let the fear of eviction fade. Let the heavy realization settle into the quiet of the night. We have reached the end of the corridor. We have opened every door. We have seen the skeleton. We have read the map. We have heard the hum. Now it is time to sit in the center of the room and understand what it all means. The fire is burning low. The shadows are long. You are safe here in the archives of the mind. Close your eyes. Let us look at our world not as we wish it to be, but as it truly is. Let us understand the nature of the house we live in. Imagine a palace, a structure of infinite complexity, built with glass that sings and stone that generates power. It was built by architects who lived for thousands of years, who spoke in mathematics, who thought in geometry. Then imagine that the architects left. Maybe it was a war. Maybe it was the flood. Maybe they simply went to sleep in the basement to wait out a storm. Time passed. Dust settled. The roof began to leak. Then we arrived. We crawled out of the mud. We were small. We were frightened. We were cold. We found the palace. But we didn't understand it. We saw the great fusion reactors and we thought they were altars to gods. So we sacrificed goats on top of them. We saw the holographic libraries and we thought they were spirit walls. So we painted over them with ochre and charcoal. We saw the ventilation shafts and we thought they were caves. So we moved in. We are squatters. That is the ultimate secret of the Vatican. The church is not the house of God. It is the squatters committee. It is the group of humans who found the instruction manual but couldn't read the language. So they made up a story instead. Think about our history. We marvel at the Great Pyramid. We marvel at Baalbek. We marvel at Machu Picchu. We ask ourselves, how did our ancestors move those stones? How did they cut granite with copper chisels? The answer is simple. They didn't. Our ancestors didn't build the house. They just moved into the ruins. The pharaohs of Egypt didn't build the Sphinx. They found it sticking out of the sand. They excavated it. They carved their names on it. They claimed it. Just like a squatter sprays graffiti on a wall to claim territory, the Department of Silence has spent 500 years scrubbing the graffiti, trying to hide the fact that we didn't build the foundations. Asterisk. Why? Because if we realized we were squatters, we would be afraid. A squatter is always afraid of the knock at the door. A squatter knows that his comfort is temporary. He knows that he has no rights. The Vatican wanted to give us the illusion of ownership, the illusion of control. They told us we were the center of the universe, that the sun revolved around us, that God created the earth specifically for our use. This was a noble lie. It gave us confidence. It allowed us to build civilization, but it was a lie built on stolen land, the artifacts we discussed. The crown, the map, the BAPHOMET. These are the property deeds, and they are all active. The house is waking up around us. We see it in the weather. The climate is changing. We think it is our fault. We think it is our cars and our factories, and perhaps it is. Partially, but the Department of Silence files suggest something else. They suggest that the climate control system of the Pre-Adamites is turning back on. The heating of the poles, the shifting of the currents. This isn't destruction. It's terraforming. The environment is being reset to the preferences of the original owners. They liked it warmer. They liked the carbon count higher. They liked the water levels higher. We are worried about saving the planet, but the planet doesn't need saving. It is simply going back to its factory settings, and we are not compatible with those settings. This is why the department is panicked. This is why they translated the warning on the wall: the herds shall be culled. Squatter can be tolerated for a while, but when the owner moves back and the squatter is removed. But there is a twist, a variable that the Glass Kings did not calculate. The human anomaly. Remember, the writing on the wall described us as unstable. The Pre-Adamites were creatures of order. silicon logic, crystalline structure, hive mind, they were perfect. And because they were perfect, they were predictable. We are not perfect. We are messy. We are carbon and water and chaotic electricity. We have short lives. We burn bright and we die fast, but in that short life we create things that the glass kings could never dream of. We create art, we create music, we create love, we create irrational self-sacrifice. This instability is not a defect. It is a mutation. The Department of Silence believes that this mutation might be our only defense. The Pre-Adamites are cold logic. They expect us to act like a herd, to run when frightened, to obey when commanded. But what happens if we don't? What happens if the Department of Silence releases the truth instead of hiding it? What happens if humanity realizes its true position? We are the orphans of the storm, but we are survivors. We survived the flood. We survived the ice age. We survived the plagues. We have lived in the ruins for 12,000 years. And in common law there is a concept called adverse possession, squatters' rights. If you occupy a house for long enough, if you improve it, if you maintain it, if you raise your children in it, it becomes yours. The Vatican has been hiding the truth to protect us. But perhaps they have been protecting the wrong thing. They have been protecting the lease. Maybe it is time to tear up the lease. The Baphomet device is humming. The UCIF telescope is signaling. The crown is pulsating. The fleet is approaching from the old stars. They are coming to take back their house, but they will find that the locks have been changed. They will find that the unstable units have grown strong. We have split the atom. We have walked on the moon. We have connected our minds through the internet, creating a global consciousness that rivals their hive mind. We are not the same frightened animals that hid in the caves. The Department of Silence is preparing for a surrender. They are preparing the safe zones. They are preparing to hand over the keys. But there are factions within the church, factions within the secret orders. Rebels. Men and women who have read the files and decided that we will not be evicted. They are leaking the maps. They are leaking the photos of the Black Knight satellite. They are whispering the truth into the ears of the dreamers. They are telling us the story of the Glass Kings, not to scare us, but to prepare us. Because the only way to defeat a landlord is to prove that you own the land. And how do you prove ownership? By living. By refusing to be silent. The Pre-Adamites built the walls. But we painted the frescoes. They built the acoustic chambers. But we sang the songs. They built the observatories. But we named the stars. This is our house now. The cardinal knew this. That is why he panicked. But also why he left the clues. He knew that the day would come when the veil would be lifted, when we would look at the skeleton in the vault and not see a god but a rival, *A. Rival made of glass. And glass can be shattered. So tonight as you lie in the safety of your room, think about the walls around you. Think about the foundation beneath you. Think about the deep time that stretches back before the history books began. You are part of a lineage that refused to die. You carry the blood of the rebels who escaped the enclosed garden. You carry the chaotic spark that the masters fear. The hum in the vault is getting louder. The signal is getting stronger. The Department of Silence is holding its breath. But you do not need to hold yours. Breathe. Breathe in the air of this earth. It is your air. The king buried the truth because he thought we were too weak to handle it. He thought we would despair, but he was wrong. Knowing the truth doesn't make us weak. It makes us dangerous, Dot. It makes us free. The story of the Pre-Adamites is not a ghost story. It is a war story, Dot, and the war is just beginning. The archives are closing now. The heavy doors are swinging shut. The dust is settling on the lead boxes and the black stone. The Department of Silence returns to the shadows, but the silence has been broken. You have heard the story. You have held the artifacts in your mind, the map, the crown, the skeleton. The warning, they are no longer secrets. They are weapons in your memory. Use them. Dream of the glass cities. Dream of the water rising. But dream of the boat that survived, because you are the captain of that boat, and the dawn is coming. The file on the Pre-Adamites is closed. But as the Department of Silence returned the dossier to the shelf, the archivist noticed something disturbing. The file sitting next to it was marked with a date from the future, 2026, and the title on that file wasn't about the past. It wasn't about what lies beneath the Vatican. It was about what has just been discovered under the ice of Antarctica by a private expedition that went dark 3 days ago. The Vatican just sent a retrieval team, not to save the explorers, but to silence what they found. Good night.